This happened on the last day of school, my junior year of high school. It's something that I remember from time to time and is just really weird. I still wonder about it. I don't know if you will find this to be super scary, but I think it's just really odd, and when it happened, it sort of freaked me out. So I went to about an average-sized high school. If my memory is correct, there was about 300 kids in each grade, so roughly about 1,000 total students. I knew pretty much everybody in my grade, or at least knew of them. I also knew most of the students in the grades surrounding mine as well. When you spend that much time at a place every day, you recognize people. So, on the morning of the last day of school, I got there like any other. I drove my car to and from school every day. It was an old car, which was also my first car. I couldn't afford the parking pass for the student parking lot, so I would park my car down in this free parking lot that the school had. It was farther away and by the baseball field and surrounded by woods on two sides. When I got inside of the school, my habit was to go to my first hour class early. I would typically sit in the classroom and drink coffee and go on my phone. I was always tired after waking up for a while, and I was never one to be out in the hallways talking that early. My first hour class was a history class, and even though the classroom would be open, the teacher was never there until right before it started. He would typically talk with other teachers in the lounge, and then would come in the classroom like 2 or 3 minutes before it started. I was also typically the first person to arrive at the class. So I got there this morning and noticed this girl sitting at one of the desks in the back. I didn't know who she was. She was the only person in the classroom other than me now, and I had never seen her before. She had dark brown hair and was somewhat tall and appeared to be around my age, maybe even older. She was just sitting there, but she wasn't in my class. I knew that for a fact. I thought that she might be a senior or something. She didn't say anything or even look at me when I entered the room. I sat down at my desk, which was a couple of rows in front of her. I did my normal routine of drinking coffee and going on my phone. It was dead silent in the room, and it got kind of awkward. She wasn't taking a test or anything like that. She wasn't doing anything at all, it seemed. Of course, I couldn't see her from where I was sitting, but when I had arrived in the room, it didn't look like she was doing anything. I decided to say something to be friendly and break the silence. So I said, "Last day of school, finally." She said nothing at all. After a few seconds, I turned around to look at her. I was going to ask her who she was, but before I could, like right when I turned around, she got up and walked right out of the classroom rather quickly. I remember that she had a really serious look on her face, and that stopped me from saying anything. It was strange, but I just brushed it off. Soon after, some of the other students started to arrive. Then the teacher got there, and then everyone else, and class started. After that, the school day went on, and it was a typical last day of school, with final tests and in other classes just doing fun stuff. When the school day was over, I talked with some friends, and then left and walked out to my car. I had stayed a little bit later than usual with it being the last day. So when I got all the way down to the parking lot where I parked, it was almost empty. I arrived to my vehicle and then got inside. Before I could back out though, I noticed somebody walking in the parking lot who was walking behind my car now. They were in the way of me leaving, so I had to wait for them to walk past, but they stopped right behind my car and just started standing there. I realized that it was the same girl who I had seen in my classroom, and she was just standing there behind my car, not moving. I couldn't back out, so I sat there waiting for her to pass. I wondered why she wasn't going anywhere. She didn't appear to be doing anything. She wasn't on her phone or talking with anyone or anything. After like a good solid minute, I opened my door and got out of my car. I was going to ask her what the deal was. As soon as I did though, she started to move. She walked away from my car and then went to the right. As she did, I asked what was going on. She didn't answer me or so much as look at me. She walked through a few empty parking spaces and then into the grass. Then she just started walking right into the woods, and there was no path there. So she was just walking into the dense woods in the middle of all the trees and stuff. It was so weird. I watched her keep walking through the woods until she was out of sight. Then I just shook my head and went home. I never saw the girl again after that day. I don't think she even went to my school. So who was she, and what was she doing there? And why did she act so weird? I still wonder those things to this day. For a little bit of background to this story, I live alone. My house is way out in the country, and it's in a very quiet city. The street has no sidewalk, and in fact is a cul-de-sac, and I'm towards the end of it. My house isn't that big or anything, but everyone's yard is a decent size. Everything in general is more spread out, and I know most of my neighbors, and most of them know me as well. So going back to last year, it all started one night. I remember that I was at home and it was a little bit later at night. For whatever reason, I was looking out one of the front windows. I don't remember exactly why I was, but I just know that I saw somebody jogging down the street. It was a man who was somewhat tall and thin, and he jogged pretty slow down the side of the street. He was kind of looking around as he jogged, like he was really taking in the scene that was around him. It wasn't like the typical jogger who is zoned in on running. He ended up soon going out of my sight. Now, this is really nothing strange, but it was out of the ordinary for my neighborhood. We literally never had joggers or people walking down the road. I knew this guy wasn't one of the neighbors, and for whatever reason, it seemed kind of odd to me. Obviously, though, there was nothing that I could do about it, and ultimately, I didn't think that it was anything. The most logical thought is that the guy lived a ways away and was just out for a jog, or maybe he was staying with a neighbor. It was a little strange that it was like 10 p.m. though. The next night, even a little bit later than that, I happened to notice the guy again. I promise you, I don't just sit and stare out my front window all night, so I don't know how I happened to see him 2 nights in a row, but I did. It gets worse though, because I actually saw him again later that night. This time he was walking though, and once again looking around at all the houses. He walked to the end of the cul-de-sac, then walked back. I still didn't think too much of it. By the next day, I had forgotten all about the guy. Now, fast forward to the next night. No, I didn't see the jogging man again this night. I just had a normal evening, and when it got late, I went up to go to bed. My bedroom is upstairs in the house and at the back end of it as well. I have a little window looking out to the backyard. Now, I kid you not, right as I was about to crawl into bed, I looked out of my window into the backyard. When I did, I saw a guy standing there walking along the back side of it, and he was wearing a clown mask. He wasn't dressed as a clown. He had normal clothing on of dark-colored sweatpants and a sweatshirt, but he was wearing this creepy clown mask over his face. It honestly kind of resembled Ronald McDonald. Based on the build though, I just thought that it might have been the guy who had been jogging around the neighborhood. It looked similar, and I was connecting the dots. The man continued walking, and then seemed to turn around and go back the opposite way. Soon he was out of my sight, and appeared to maybe be off my property as well. I decided to go downstairs and investigate. When I got down there, I looked out of just about every window in the house. I didn't see the guy, and I figured that he was gone. I wasn't sure what that was all about. Why was a clown man in my backyard? And was it really the same man who had been jogging around the neighborhood? Something fishy was going on. I stayed up downstairs for a little while. I wasn't tired anymore, and I hate trying to sleep when I'm not tired, so I decided to sit down on the couch and watch TV until I could relax again and get sleepy. I sat down there for probably about 20 minutes. Then I heard a noise from the back end of the house. I got up and looked out of a window. The clown man was back. But not only that, now he was at my back door, and it looked like he was trying to get inside. I had a gun at the time, but it was upstairs in my bedroom and was locked up. I had never had to use it in my time living there, and had it for a long time. I should have brought it downstairs, but I just forgot, which makes me feel dumb looking back. But that's just what happened. I went over to the door and yelled loudly that I had a gun and I would shoot the guy if he broke in. I was hoping that would scare him off, and I wouldn't need to even get my gun. But his response was not what I was expecting. Not only did he not go away, but I heard from the other side of the door the clown laughing. It was this creepy laugh, the way you would expect a scary clown to. Then I ran upstairs to actually get my gun. By now my adrenaline was really going, and I got up into my room, got the gun, and then went back downstairs. However, when I arrived back down there, the clown was gone. I opened up the back door and looked around. I went all through the backyard, but he wasn't there. He must have finally ran away. I called the police and reported a suspicious clown man and possible attempted break-in. They came to my house and I spoke with them for a while. After that night, he did not return, and I also didn't see the jogging man either. I really think that it was the same guy, and that possibly he was scouting out the houses disguised as a jogger or something, because that was really suspicious. This happened a few weeks ago. I went on a road trip to take a friend of mine home to Colorado. She wanted to fly back, but I really wanted to go on a road trip. I live in Ohio, so we had to go through Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, and Kansas. A 22-hour road trip to get there, not including the rest stops. I'd never traveled this far before in a car. I've flown to Florida once or twice, and I didn't see myself getting an opportunity like this in the near future. I drove most of the way because, well, I love to drive. The person I was taking home said if we needed to switch, it wouldn't be a big deal. At this point, I had been behind the wheel for nearly 12 hours, and maybe it was because I was tired, but the creepiest thing happened. I needed gas, and there was this station closed, so it was dark aside from the lights from the pump and the street light at the gas station. I was creeped out, but I also wasn't concerned because I hadn't had any problems beforehand. Now, this gas station was different than what I was used to. To get gas, you do the usual, select the type of gas you want, but as soon as you pull the nozzle from the pump and into your car, then you had to pull a lever before you could pump the gas. It took me a while of fidgeting to realize this, but right as I did, I heard a voice call out from beside the closed building of the gas station. I don't remember what exactly it said, but if I had to guess, it was a "hey" or a "over here" from a male voice. When I set the pump to where I didn't have to hold the trigger, I looked up and saw nothing there. Again though, I was tired, so I didn't pay any attention to it. This was a deserted gas station, but about halfway through my gas being done, I heard it again. Another male voice called out to me. Maybe he thought I was alone because my roommate was sleeping with the front seat laid all the way down. I didn't feel like leaving the gas station mid-pump and having to stop again somewhere else, so I ignored it and kept pumping while looking at my phone. Next, I heard the man whistling for me like I was a dog, and the absolute worst feeling came over me. Something I have genuinely never felt before. It was a strong feeling of fear. I looked up, and sure enough, there was a man. He was dressed in a brown coat with the hood up and red shorts. After I looked up, he let out a yell and said, "Hey, look at me when I'm talking to you." It was so loud that my friend laying in the front seat shot up and rolled her window down to check on me. At that point, the man was speed walking over towards me. But it was like as soon as my friend made herself known, he turned himself around and booked it away from me to the back of the building. I heard a car start and gravel fly as he got out of there. I didn't get a great look at the car or van because it was dark and I admittedly was stuck in my place. I know a lot of people try to plan for this type of stuff, especially women like me. They have a fully thought out idea of how to handle it just like I did. But when it happened, I was clueless and stuck in fear. I'm glad my roommate let her presence be known when she did, and I'm glad I wasn't alone. After I filled up the car, she took over driving for me and I got some much needed sleep. I don't know what that man wanted or why he was yelling at me or even walked towards me, but I don't ever want to experience something like that again. A few years ago, about 2019, I was riding the bus one night to get home. There was a guy on the bus that was a little disheveled and dirty looking. He reeked of alcohol and was generally acting weird. I was sitting in the back and he sat near me and tried to talk to me. I was polite at first. I ride the bus at night a lot, so a drunk homeless guy does not bother me and I have no problem making small talk with a stranger on the bus. Plus, I'm used to there being one or two sketchy people on the bus considering the route and the fact that it's late at night. When he tried to get flirty, I politely told him that I was not interested and I put my headphones back in my ears and ignored him. He got a little frustrated and even said some vulgar things, but I couldn't really hear him, so it was fine. It wasn't my first rodeo being in that kind of a situation, and while it's uncomfortable and there's nothing okay about that sort of behavior, I rarely feel threatened. Most of the time, they're harmless, all bark and no bite. I'm a big girl, as in tall and overweight, and I know basic self-defense and always have an exit strategy when there are scenarios I don't feel safe in. Many people like that on the bus I find most of the time, ignoring them and acting like I'm not fazed is enough for them to get bored and find something else to do. I only engage if they get in my face or start harassing other passengers, especially other women, kids, and seniors, or anyone who appears vulnerable, because I won't tolerate that. Also, the bus drivers usually don't put up with that either. Anyways, this random drunk homeless guy would have been just one of the many if it wasn't for what happened next. So my stop was coming up and I was looking forward to going home. I was exhausted and so ready to go to bed. I pulled the cord to indicate that I wanted off at the next stop, and the man got up and walked to the front to talk to the driver and then laughed loudly. I didn't think much of it except I was a little weary and thought, please don't tell me we're getting off at the same stop. As the bus slowed down, I was waiting at the back door to be let off. Instead of opening the back door though, the driver opened the front door and the drunk guy got off. I asked the driver to open the back door and I saw him shake his head in the mirror. Annoyed, I walked to the front of the bus to get off there, but the driver closed the door before I could get off and started driving again. Angrily, I told the driver, "Hey, that was my stop." The driver replied, "Sorry, but I can't in good conscience let you off at the same stop as that guy. Either get off at the next stop or wait until we get to a transit station and take a bus going the other way." Not understanding, I asked why. The driver said, "Because of what he said to me." I asked what the drunk homeless guy had said, and the driver just said, "Nothing I would like to repeat ever. I'm so sorry, but just trust me." The driver looked shaken considering the tone of his voice and the look on his face. As frustrated and anxious as I was to get home, I trusted him and took his word for it. I caught another bus going the other way at the next terminal, and watched the driver radio dispatch and get some peace officers and transit security to patrol the area near my stop. They were parked in the parking lot near my building when I finally got off. I was extremely paranoid and on high alert as I walked the few blocks to my apartment that night, fortunately without further incident. I never saw that guy again, and I'm okay with that. To this day, I wonder what exactly he said to the driver. It bugs me not knowing, but at the same time, maybe it's better that way. Either way, the implications were enough to have freaked me out. This happened about a year and a half ago, roughly. One night, after a long day of work, I was driving home and I stopped at Subway. By now, it was starting to get late, and I was craving a foot-long Italian herbs and cheese sub. So I pulled into the parking lot, parked my car, and then went inside. I started ordering what I wanted, and things were going well. However, when I was about to pay, the Subway employee said something strange. He asked me if I had driven there by myself. At first, I didn't know what to say. It didn't really sound creepy the way he had said it, but it was not a normal thing to ask. Then he said that he just saw a man enter my car, and that's why he was asking. You see, I was facing the Subway counter, and my back was turned to the parking lot. Out the window, I guess the Subway worker saw somebody enter my car. I said that I had gone there alone, and I immediately turned around to look at my car. I didn't see anything anymore because it was nighttime and too dark to see in the windows of my vehicle. I walked over to the window and looked closer, but still couldn't see anything. The Subway employee told me that he saw a guy walk out from near the road and then approach my car. Apparently, the guy just opened one of the doors and went right inside. During this time, I drove a pretty old car, and the doors actually didn't lock. So I would never keep anything valuable in the car, and I had never had a problem with it to that point. I asked the man if he was sure, probably because I just couldn't believe it. But there were no other cars nearby in the parking lot. He said yes, and then I decided to call the police. I reported what happened, and I told them that some guy was inside of my car. Then when I got the sandwich, I just ate it inside while I waited for the cops. When they got there, they found a man hiding in the back seat of my car. I'm really grateful to that Subway employee. If he had not seen the man enter my car, who knows what would have happened. I had not seen the man before and didn't know who he was. I don't know if the guy knew my car didn't lock or if it was just random and he got lucky. Either way, it was a close call that night. I had a creepy experience at Walmart a while back. So I was there one evening to do some shopping. Right when I got there, I noticed that the store was pretty busy. After entering the store, I headed to the right. Then I had to go back across the store to get to the grocery department. When I was walking over there, I saw a man who had climbed up on top of a shelf in an aisle. He was up there for no reason other than to just stand there, it appeared, and he was clearly not supposed to be up there. It seemed crazy to me. A few people were noticing him and looking at him, wondering why he was climbing up there. Then I noticed an employee go over to him and tell him to get down. I remember hearing him say no in response, but I just kept walking and minded my own business. I went over to the groceries and continued with my shopping. I ended up being over there for a while, getting a good amount of stuff. When I was finally almost done shopping, I went to another part of the store to get paper towels. It was one of my last items. This aisle was much more quiet than the others. As I was back there, I remembered that I noticed that same guy again, the one who had been standing on top of the shelf, except now he was hiding. It was an aisle with the paper towels and stuff, so he was hiding behind a bunch of the products. It's one of those aisles that I've seen people make forts in before. He was not well visible, but from the angle that I was at, I could see him. After I was looking at him for a few seconds, he turned and looked at me. I didn't really care what he was doing or why he was hiding, so I pretty much just ignored him. I turned and started to walk away. But when I did, I heard the man start to emerge from his hiding spot. Maybe he thought that I was going to turn him in or something, I don't know, but I wasn't going to. Really, I was just going to leave to check out. But after hearing the man leaving his area, I heard him start to walk towards me at a pretty quick speed. That's when I turned around. As soon as I did, the man was right on me, and he pushed me down, knocking me to the ground. I fell back, and the man then ran off. I was not injured or anything, but it did hurt. I got up and was now really angry. I found an employee and did report him. I was told that they were already looking for the guy. By the time that I had made it to the front of the store to check out, I saw that the police were there. I decided to talk to an officer about the guy shoving me because I was still mad about it. And it wasn't just a couple of police officers there, it was like 10 of them. So they went in the Walmart to find him as I checked out. I heard some yelling and screaming coming from deeper in the store. After I left, I saw them leaving with the man a short time later. I'm not sure why he acted so crazy, but I'm glad that he was caught. This takes place a few years ago when I went to Costco one night. I used to have a membership there. I was really just trying it out and only had it for a few months. When I did, I would shop there all the time though. In fact, I did pretty much all my shopping there because why not? So one evening, I went there at around 7 o'clock p.m. I arrived at the Costco and things were not too busy, pretty average I would say. I had some things that I needed to get that were all around the store. So I started shopping around, and before long, I noticed a man. This guy seemed to maybe be following me. I first noticed him about 5 minutes after entering the store. He was standing towards the end of the aisle that I was in, and he kind of looked over at me a few times. It was like he was doing a bad job of trying to be inconspicuous, or else I just picked it up really well. But I left the aisle with a weird feeling, only to see the guy again in the next area that I went. He was standing a ways away, pretending to look at an item. To test him, I quickly walked away from there and to the other end of the store. I didn't see him obviously following me, but when I was over there for about a minute, I saw him casually walk by. I didn't know what he was doing. I decided to continue my shopping, but to keep an eye on him, and he stayed with me the entire way. Each spot that I would see him nearby. He always kept a pretty good distance though, never getting too close, but he always seemed to have eyes on me. When I was finally done shopping, I went to check out. Now I was getting worried. What would I do after checking out? When I left the store, I was no longer in a place with a bunch of other people. Would the man go after me or attack me or something? Should I tell somebody? Should I confront him? I wasn't sure what to do, so I decided to play it by ear. When I got in line to check out, I looked around and at first didn't see him. But then I noticed a man emerging from a nearby aisle. He had a few items in his hands. Then I started unloading my items to the conveyor belt and the man got in line right behind me. He didn't look at me and pretended like nothing was out of the normal. So I continued on, and all my items were scanned by the cashier, and then I paid for them. After that, it was the man's turn. I was going as fast as I could after paying to get my things together and leave. But when I was starting to walk away, I overheard the cashier asking for the man's Costco membership card. He didn't have one. I remember him saying that he lost it or something like that, and when asked for his member ID, he claimed he forgot. They wouldn't let him buy anything without it. I remember that as I was walking off, I heard him start to say, "Forget it, I'll just leave then." That's when I really picked up the pace. I was borderline jogging the rest of the way out of there. When I made it out, I did not see the man, so I bolted from my car, got inside, and then drove home. Looking back, I realized that that man did not have a Costco membership, so he might have just been there to stalk me or something. He was probably trying to buy a few things to act normal. I'm glad that they caught him. I really hope that maybe it was just somehow a crazy coincidence that he followed me around, but I really don't think it was. I know that guy was following me for some reason. I ended up reporting him to the Costco. I'm not sure what they could do, but I didn't know what else I could do. I never saw him again after that. I have a Costco membership and have had one for almost 10 years now. In all my years and many trips going there, there is one memory that really stands out. It's by far the craziest thing that's ever happened when I've been there. So I went to Costco one afternoon to do some shopping for the week. This particular week I didn't need as much stuff. Normally I will stock up and buy more things. It happened to be a weekend, so when I walked into the store it was extremely busy. People were everywhere pushing their carts and it was tough to navigate the store. I slowly made my way in and out of the aisles. I got most of the things that I needed within a good 10 or 15 minutes. I remember that I reached the end of an aisle and there was a little display with my favorite brand of water. It's not the only water that I drink, but I drink them away from home and take them with me places. There were just a few packs left and most of them had been bought. There was also another place in the store where they had more of this water, but this was just a display at the end of the aisle. Anyways, I took a few packs and put them in my cart. Like right after I did that, I looked up and I saw this guy who was pulling 2 carts around. I noticed that in one of his shopping carts, he had literally like 20 packs of the same water that I got. When he saw the waters that I had, he nearly ran me over with one of his carts, which was also overflowing with stuff. He took all the remaining waters off the shelf, tossed them into his cart, and then noticed me. He called out to me as I was starting to walk away. I stopped and looked back at the man. The guy had really taken shopping in bulk to the extreme. He had 2 overflowing carts, which had maybe a total of 5 products in them, meaning he pretty much bought out the store of each item that he had. So I asked him what was up, and I saw him looking at the waters in my cart. He said that he noticed I got them and asked if I wouldn't mind giving them up. I looked at all the ones that he had and I said, "Why do you need so many?" He told me to mind my business and then asked again if he could have them. As he was asking, he was already walking to my cart and started to reach out to grab them, as if he expected me to say yes. I was ticked off by the man's overall behavior and I said no, I wouldn't give them up. He stopped, looked really surprised, and then asked why. I told him to mind his business, then I started to walk away. The guy started to follow me with his 2 carts, but it was too hard for him to keep up with me pushing all that way. Plus, the aisles were really crowded, so he couldn't maneuver them as well as me with only 1 cart. I had almost everything that I needed by that point, so I finished up and got the last few items and then headed to the checkouts. I got there, then paid for all my items and started to leave. Things were still extremely busy. I walked out to my car in the parking lot. Then I began to unload the bags of items into the trunk of my car. As I was doing this, I was not really paying that much of attention to my surroundings, I guess, because when I was reaching into the cart, suddenly I saw this man walk right up, seemingly out of nowhere. I hadn't noticed him nearby or approaching. It was the same man from the store. He reached into my trunk, grabbed the packs of water that I had, and then started sprinting away. I was so angry and I dropped what I was doing and chased after him. He was faster than me though and also had a head start. His car was parked not that far away. He literally got into the car, tossed the water in, and then slammed the door shut. I got behind his car and I was going to try to get him to give me my water back. The man violently started his engine and backed out really quick. When he did, he came within about 6 inches from running me over. I had to jump out of the way. And to be honest, I don't think he would have cared if he did run me over. All that just to get even more of that stupid water. I really think that guy was just obsessed with stocking up on his favorite brands. I went inside and reported him to Costco. I could only give them a description though. They contacted the police because he almost ran me over and I spoke with them as well. I told them the car description and the man's description. I'm not sure if anything was ever done about it though. I've been to the Costco many times since then and have never seen him, so maybe he got banned or something. Looking back though, I still can't believe that happened. This took place last year. I went to a mall nearby where I live one night. I had to get a birthday present for my sister's kid. I didn't really know what I could get him, but I figured that the mall would have some options, so I walked around trying to get some ideas. I had asked my sister, and she just said the usual, "It doesn't matter, I'm sure he will like whatever you get him." Her son was 9 years old at the time, and I had already got him my good gift ideas of a Nerf basketball hoop the previous year. 2 years ago, my sister got mad at me for getting him video games because she said he played them too much. Anyways, I tried to remember back to when I was 9 and think of what I would have liked. I ended up getting him more video games because I knew he would like them, and I don't care what my sister says. I'm going to be a cool uncle to this kid. So I was in the mall for maybe 30 minutes or so. When I was done shopping, I left to go out to my car. There was a pretty big parking garage right next to the mall where I had parked in. By now, with it being nighttime, the parking garage was basically empty. I had parked on the second level because usually when I go, it's busy and it's just kind of a habit for me. So I got to my car and then went inside. Before I had a chance to back up and leave though, I saw something really strange. There was what looked like a man running down the parking garage aisle really fast. And I mean like extremely fast. It was pretty much just a blur almost. He went out of my sight and I was left wondering if I really just saw that. Then moments later, the man came running back from the other direction once more extremely fast. It was really strange. I thought to myself, did that guy really just run that fast? And then I thought to myself, why is someone running that fast in a mall parking garage? It was certainly strange to say the least. I looked around in the direction that the man had run, and then I saw him. The guy was standing just in front of the wall at the end of the parking garage. He was just standing there, not really doing anything other than looking around. I kept watching him because I was so confused and also curious. Was he going to run some more? Was he practicing or training for something? My eyes were locked onto the guy to see what he would do. I watched him for at least 2 or 3 minutes straight, but he didn't do anything. He just kept standing there. Then I looked away for a second. When I looked back, he was gone. Just like that. It was really strange. After that, I just left. The whole thing just struck me as really odd. Who was that guy, and what was he doing? I later found out through social media that others had seen him too. There were reports of him running through the mall occasionally. He was called the Mall Runner. Some other people had seen him around the mall as well. For a few weeks, I thought that it was just some random guy who liked to run around the mall for some reason. And then I saw him online a couple of weeks after this. It was a social media post from a local news account. It said that a man known as the Mall Runner was wanted for multiple robberies. So apparently he was a criminal as well. He seemed to be a really mysterious and strange guy. I'm glad that he didn't try anything with me when I saw him in the garage that night. A while back, I accidentally called the wrong number on my cell phone. I was trying to call a mechanic to work on my car that had an oil leak. However, I must have dialed wrong. When someone picked up the phone, it was a man's voice who asked why I was calling in a sort of strange tone. I said my name, and I asked if this was a mechanic that I was trying to reach. He said no, and once again in a strange tone, he asked me why I had called that number. I said that I must have dialed wrong by mistake, and I didn't mean to, and I apologized. The person on the other end of the phone just said, "Okay." Then they hung up. The whole interaction just seemed really weird to me, but overall I was glad that it was over. I dialed again, and this time correctly got the mechanic that I was going for. But not long after I got off the phone with the mechanic, there was a call back from the first number that I had called. I answered and said hello, but was hung up on immediately without anybody saying anything. I didn't know if it was a mistake or what, but after that they didn't call me again. So during this time, I was renting a house and I lived by myself. The house was pretty small, and it was on a street with a lot of other houses that was fairly populated. It was common to see people walking down the sidewalk and stuff, and cars parking on the side of the street as well. But despite that, I started to notice strange things. The first was that I saw this car parked right across the street from my house really late at night. This was the very next night. I'm not sure exactly how I noticed the car parking right away. I think I just happened to be near the window and noticed it. But this man got out and he just kind of stood around by the car. He was looking around and I moved away from the window, but I kept watching him. The man looked in the direction of my house several times, like that was his main focus. By now, I was suspicious. However, the man did not really do anything. After about 10 minutes, he went back into the car. He didn't drive away though. Before going to bed, I saw that he was still in the driver's seat of that same car, and that was like half an hour later. I was really weirded out. Nothing seemed to happen though, and the next morning he was gone. The next day I saw these two guys walking down the street, but this time it was during the daytime. They were both wearing sunglasses, and I only noticed them because they went back and forth down the sidewalk a bunch of times. They kept passing by my house and kind of glancing over. They went by at least 10 times in the span of an hour, and I had never seen them before prior to that. They also weren't doing any work or anything like that. I didn't know what was up with them. Then, later on that night, I was passing by the front of the house, and I caught somebody running out of my front yard. I couldn't tell who it was, other than it appeared to be a man, and he ran off down the street and out of my sight. Things like that hadn't been happening prior to this. I didn't know what was going on. There were more small things that happened that I'm not really sure about. Things like cars pulling into my driveway just to turn around, people walking down the street late at night, or unknown vehicles parking on the side of the road across from my house at all hours of the day and night, and the driver never getting out. For like a week, these things happened all the time. I had no idea why. Slowly, they decreased though, and then seemed to stop. I wasn't sure if I was just randomly paranoid for some reason, or if something was going on. And the phone call was so strange, I feel like they might be linked, because prior to the phone call I didn't notice anything like that happening, and almost right after I noticed it. But overall, I don't really know anything. Nothing that definitive happened, like nobody tried to break into my house and nobody knocked on my door. It was all really sketchy and suspicious things that just makes me wonder. I'm just glad that nothing strange has happened since then and these things seem to have stopped. It remains a bit of a mystery. This happened back when I was in high school. I was a junior and I was really excited for the school year to be over and it to officially be summertime. In my classes, a few of them had final tests, and others we didn't do anything. In the second to last class of the day, it was geography. We had completed everything for the semester, so we were just watching a movie. We were all waiting for the school day to be over at that point. I don't recall what movie we were watching, but I saw a lot of movies in high school. I just remember that we were watching it on the teacher's smartboard. Out of nowhere, the screen went black for a second. Then, with an all-black screen, these creepy messages started coming across. The first thing it said on the screen was an expletive about the high school. Then the text changed and said, "I can see you all." After that, it started saying more weird stuff like that. I don't recall everything. It was kind of like a slideshow on the screen, where it was all black except for the words, which were in some generic font. It was honestly kind of creepy and unsettling. Everybody thought that it was really strange. At first, I figured that it was a prank. It made sense for some kids, probably seniors, on the last day of school to hack into one of the computers and do this. It was still really weird though. When all the students, including myself, saw it, a few said something. The teacher saw it too, and after like 30 seconds or so, she tried doing stuff on her computer. She didn't know what was going on. It didn't stop. Then she ended up restarting her computer and the smartboard. At first, that seemed to work. But then, like right after we started the movie up again, the words came back. It was like somebody was hacking into the smartboard. I didn't know what was going on, and the strange words appeared on the screen again. They started to get more threatening. I remember one of them saying something like, "You better watch out," and "Everybody be careful." As it kept going, the teacher ended up unplugging the computer and the smartboard from the wall. She then said that she was going to see what was going on and we could talk amongst ourselves but behave. Then she left the classroom. We were all talking about it, wondering who had done it. The messages had been very cryptic, and to me, I still thought that it was probably a prank by some students. The teacher was gone for at least 5 to 10 minutes. When she came back, she didn't say much. She just said that we were going to just hang out for the rest of the class period and not watch the movie. Then she started talking with us about summer plans and things like that. In the midst of that, all the lights went off. This was really strange. I didn't know what was going on, if somebody was messing with us or what. The power had basically gone out in the classroom, and the teacher then got up and said she would be right back again. She left the classroom only to return like a minute later. She said that all the power in the school had gone out. There wasn't a storm going on or anything, so I didn't know why. Then she also said that the school was now in a lockdown. I went from thinking it was a funny prank to actually feeling worried. The mood in the classroom went down considerably. We all sat there in the dark and waited. It got really quiet in the classroom. Not long after that, the lights did come back on, but the lockdown was still in effect. The lockdown ended up going past the normal time of when our class would be out. It was very confusing. Finally, the lockdown ended. We were let out of that class and went to our final class of the day for a shorter time period. Not much was said about the lockdown. At the end of the school day, we all went home for the summer. I tried to find out what on earth had happened. The only thing that I found out was that it was not a prank by some students. It had happened from somebody who did not attend the school. That's really the only thing that I ever knew about it. I continued to go to the school and I graduated from there. Nothing else was ever really said about it. To me, that experience still seems really creepy. It was just so unsettling to see those texts over the screen. I still want to know who was behind it. This happened when I was much younger, and it was back way before the clown trends of like 2016 where everybody was dressing up as clowns. I was about 10 years old and I lived with my parents and my older sister. One night though, I found myself home alone. I can't remember exactly where my sister was, but my parents were at family's, but it was something where I would have been really bored. I didn't stay at home by myself too often. Our house and neighborhood was pretty normal for the most part. We had a small-sized front yard as well as backyard. The neighborhood street was generally pretty quiet, but we had a good amount of neighbors. After my parents left, I probably just watched TV in the living room and hung out. I don't remember exactly what I did. A few hours in though, at maybe 9 p.m., I remember that I heard this noise. I couldn't quite tell what it was, but it sounded like it was coming from the front door area. Like maybe it was somebody knocking on the door but quietly, or maybe they were trying to unlock the door or open it. I couldn't quite make out what exactly the sound was, but for a moment I thought that maybe my parents were home already. After not hearing anything for the next few seconds, I decided to get up and look. I walked over towards the front door. As soon as I was walking past it though, I saw a clown standing there. I noticed through the little window on the front door. There was a guy wearing a clown mask just standing there, literally staring right into the door. I was not expecting to see it at all. I jumped back and then ran all the way upstairs. Then I found a phone and I called my parents. However, they did not answer at the time. I was really scared from seeing the clown man. I didn't hear any more noises or anything, so I went over to an upstairs window where I could look outside near the front door. When I did, I saw that the clown man was now gone. This made me feel a little bit better. I didn't know why he had been there in the first place, but it seemed as though he was gone now. So I went back downstairs and then looked around out the front window. I still didn't see the clown anywhere, so I returned to the living room couch and resumed watching TV. Sometime later, maybe like 30 minutes, I got up to go into the kitchen. When I was doing this, I passed by a back window, and that's when I saw him again. The guy dressed as a clown was standing right on the other side of one of the windows and looking into the house. As soon as I saw him, I immediately turned and ran away. This time I ran upstairs and went all the way to my bedroom. I was really scared and did not want to leave my room at all. However, not long after this, as I was hiding under my blankets, there was a call on the phone. I left my bedroom and went out into the hallway and answered it. It was my parents calling back. I told them what was going on, and they said that they were on the way home now. I went back into my room and hid there for the rest of the time until my parents returned. When they did, the clown was gone. My dad searched the entire property, but the clown was nowhere to be seen. I was glad that he was gone, and I'm not sure why he was there in the first place. Maybe it was just somebody trying to be funny. But going into the backyard and looking through a window is a little too far for a prank if you ask me. After that night, I didn't want to stay at home alone for a long time. This happened in February 2016 when I was 23 years old. I was living in northern New Mexico at the time and had driven up to Boulder, Colorado to visit a friend for the weekend. I had taken this route several times before, so I was comfortable driving the long distance alone. The trip home was uneventful until I stopped for gas in Alamosa, Colorado. This was the last real big town before home, about 90 miles to go with not a whole lot in between, except for a few tiny rural communities and desolate desert landscape. It was around 6 p.m. and starting to get dark outside. As I pulled out of the gas station, I noticed a dark blue sedan pull out behind me and turn onto the same highway that I was getting on. I didn't think anything of it until the car started tailgating me. I was really confused because they could have easily passed me if I was driving too slow, since there were hardly any other cars on the road. When I sped up, they did too. When I slowed down, so did they. No matter what speed I drove at, the car stayed right behind me. I assumed it was a cop waiting for me to make a mistake to pull me over, but it never did. I was starting to get uncomfortable, so in the next little small town community I saw, I pulled over onto the side of a convenience store. I thought to myself that if this was a cop, they would surely get out and talk to me. They pulled up right behind me, but nobody got out of the car. I parked and waited for several minutes before driving off, with the car still following close behind. As soon as I crossed the state line into New Mexico, I knew that this was for sure not a cop. My heart sank as I drove deeper and deeper into the dark mesa. I didn't have a real phone at the time, just an old iPhone that could connect to Wi-Fi, so there was no way for me to let anybody know what was happening. It's also important to mention that this was a particularly sketchy area. A lot of eerie and sometimes downright frightening stuff happens out on the Taos Mesa, which is what I was driving through. I was so distraught over why this person was still tailgating me that I drove right past the last turn onto the long dirt road that would have taken me home. Thankfully, just down the highway there was a popular and well-lit scenic rest area I could turn around at. The sedan, of course, pulled in right behind me, but this time, feeling brave and stupid, I decided to confront them. Behind the wheel was a totally normal-looking middle-aged woman. I'm not sure what I was expecting, but it certainly wasn't that. The back seat was too dark to tell if anybody was sitting back there. I asked her what her problem was, and she apologized, saying that she thought this was her daughter's car. This made no sense because my car had a completely different state's plate than her car and was also covered in unique bumper stickers. There was no way it could have been confused for anybody else's car. Also, why would she not have just called her daughter instead of following me for close to 90 miles? And that was when I had stopped for the first time and didn't get out of the car. It made no sense. I told her off and she apologized again. When I got back onto the highway and turned onto my dirt dead-end road, she turned in too. I immediately pulled over and yelled at her to stop following me, and there was no way out to the highway from this road. She apologized again, but when I got back in my car and started driving, she kept on following me. Thankfully, I was close enough to home and knew my boyfriend was there waiting for me. She pulled into my driveway with me, this time getting out of her car, and asked if she could please stay the night. She said that she was so tired and to please let her in. I was screaming at her to leave when my boyfriend came outside hearing the commotion. Literally the moment she saw him, she ran back into her car and sped off. The whole ordeal was so freaky, and to this day I have no idea what she really wanted or why she chose to follow my car for such a far distance. Something really strange happened last week. So I went to the local Walmart near where I live sort of late at night. I only needed a couple of quick things and I was hoping to be in and out. Walmart is the easiest store to go to for me because I live less than a mile away. So I left my apartment and quickly drove there and then parked my car. By now it was after 10 o'clock at night. I was expecting the store to be pretty quiet because of this, and when I walked inside, there didn't seem to be very many people around. However, when I was in the far back of the store getting milk, I saw this woman standing sort of near me. As I opened the freezer door to select a milk, the woman started walking over to me. When she reached me and got within about 5 feet from where I was standing, she stopped, but she didn't say anything. She just looked at me. This woman had brown hair, looked to be maybe 45 to 50, and was wearing a sweatshirt and sweatpants. After she just stared at me for a few seconds, I said hi to her and asked her what was going on. She said nothing. She just stared at me. It was really weird. I figured that maybe something was wrong with her or something like that, so I just got the milk and then walked away. The woman did not follow me. She stayed where she was. However, she did keep watching me, which was strange. I walked away and went on with trying to get the items that I needed. Like I said, I didn't need too much stuff, so I only shopped for like another 5 minutes or so. Then I went up to the self-checkouts in the store. When I was scanning my items, I looked around and happened to notice the woman again. She was standing a ways away, just staring at me once more. I found this to be especially odd. Was she following me or something? I certainly had never seen her before this day. But overall, I figured that I would just leave and never see her again. So I walked out of the store and then back to my car in the parking lot. I wasn't looking around to see if she was following me or anything. I wasn't scared of the lady, and I didn't think she even left the store. However, after putting my items in the car and then starting it up, I saw her. She was now pushing a cart in the parking lot and heading right towards me. As it was, she was only about 20 feet away. The woman pushed her cart, which was empty, straight for my vehicle. Then she rammed the cart right into my car. It was really hard too, like she was trying to damage it. She backed it up and then rammed it again. Then she started repeatedly ramming it into my car over and over again. She didn't say anything, but did have an angry look on her face. I really was not expecting that. I quickly hit the gas pedal and got out of there quick. When I had made it off the property, I called the cops. I reported the woman and what she was doing. After getting back to my place, I looked at the damage. It wasn't too bad, but there were a few small dents and some very noticeable scratches on my car. I don't know what that woman's problem was. I figured that she had to be on drugs. Overall, it's pretty crazy because it was so unexpected. I still haven't got my car fixed, and I'm not sure when I will, but I plan to. I just hope that I never see that lady again. I used to work at a company sort of in the city, and I would work night shifts there. I'd usually get off at like midnight, and overall I didn't mind it too much. One time when I was working one night, it was time for my break at about 8:30 p.m. I left the office and I walked out to this Subway restaurant that was within walking distance from work. It wasn't that far away, and the restaurant was sort of on the edge of the city area, and I walked over there. When I got inside that night, I recalled that nobody else was in there except for an employee behind the counter. I walked up, ordered, got a sandwich, and then went over to the other end of the Subway. There was a long high table area with a bunch of stools facing this large window that looked outside. That's where I went and sat down. You could see what was a sidewalk going between the Subway and another building. It was sort of like an alleyway, and to the right was the street, which was very quiet now. As I was sitting there for maybe 5 minutes, I saw somebody starting to walk up on the sidewalk. This person appeared to be a man who was wearing a rather large jacket and baggy pants. He walked up to the sidewalk that went right in front of the window where I was sitting. I assumed that he would pass by in front of me and go down the alleyway. However, when the man got even with me, he stopped, and then he turned and started looking at me. It was really weird. The man was now standing there facing me right on the other side of the window and staring at me. He wasn't waving to me or trying to communicate in any way. He was just standing there. It was kind of creepy. After like 10 or 15 seconds, I realized that he wasn't going to leave. I tried to ignore him and I just looked down. But when I looked up a short time later, he was still there and still just staring at me. At that point, I decided to move. I got up and I walked away from the window and to the other end of the subway. Then I sat down at a different table facing away from the window, just barely within view of it. I tried to just ignore the guy, and I also hoped that he wouldn't come inside the subway. He never did enter, and a while later I looked to the window again and he was finally gone. When my break was over, I left the subway and walked back to the office. Then I finished with work for the next few hours. When I got off a little bit after midnight, I was about to leave. When I got towards the doors though, I looked out into the parking lot. I saw the same guy there. The man who had been staring at me at Subway was now in my work parking lot. He was standing sort of in the middle of it. He wasn't right by my car or anything, but I would have to walk past him to get to my car. I was glad that I saw him before I left the building. I decided to wait. At that hour, not very many people were there anymore, so nobody else was in the parking lot. There were a few cars scattered around, but I didn't want to take a chance. I waited around near the door inside, looking out every so often. The man stayed there, just kind of standing around for at least 10 minutes. Finally, I looked back and I saw him walking away. As soon as he made it off the property, I sprinted to my car, got inside, and drove home. I was really glad to make it away from him. I'm not sure what that guy was doing that night. It was really creepy the way he just stood there both times and the way he was staring at me. This occurred in the middle of the COVID pandemic, so public transportation was very often not busy, and I suppose some criminals looked to benefit from that. At midnight one night, I was on my way home alone. As I got on the bus and sat down, I almost immediately registered a man on the other side of where I was sitting who took an interest in me. It was a very clear interest. He fixed his gaze firmly on me almost the entire way. I gradually started to get a little uncomfortable, and a couple of occasions I allowed myself to let my eyes wander across the bus to confirm that I was indeed being watched. I got plenty of confirmation, as he refused to take his eyes off me. Not only did his behavior worry me at this point, but also his appearance in general. He was wearing a large outer jacket with the hood pulled down well over his head, and with clear focus on hiding the lower part of his face with the help of the neck of the jacket. When we got to the point where I must change from bus to subway, he followed. I made a few random small stops here and there to check departures with the intention of watching his movements. As expected, he also stopped. He then followed me down onto the platform, where he clearly stood and watched me from a distance. I was waiting for the train now, and I was beginning to feel the fear that he would follow me all the way to the end station where I would be getting off. First, a different train arrived, a train which I was not taking. I decided to get onto one of the carriages to give the impression that I was going that way, then get off again before the doors closed for departure. I did this both to mislead the man, but also to confirm to myself that he was indeed after me, and it wasn't just me being paranoid. Once again, my suspicions were confirmed. He got into the carriage, but then he turned around and saw that I had gotten off again, and he also got off and stood back on the platform. Now the anxiety really started to kick in. Finally, my train arrived, and I stood a bit waiting before I got on, then strategically slipped on the second the doors closed. He did the same. I then sat down in the front seat of the front carriage with my back to the cab to make sure that he had no opportunity to move behind me, as I sat with a full view of the entire carriage. Unsurprisingly, he walked towards me and sat in the seats directly in front of me, leaned back with his arm resting over the back of the seats, and fixed his gaze on me. I felt my heart pounding away, and that my breathing was getting harder to keep in check. Nevertheless, I tried my best to appear unaffected by it all, as I didn't want him to see that I was scared. But at the same time, it was becoming more and more challenging for me to keep a cool head and think clearly. A little beyond us sat another slightly younger guy. I hoped that the other younger guy would stay on the train with us to my stop, which was the last one. My plan was that if I didn't have to get off alone, that I could ask to be accompanied home by the younger man. There were now only 3 of us left on the track, and what I feared most at that point happened. The other guy was starting to get ready to get off at the next stop, which was 2 stops before mine. Now the adrenaline really kicked in, and I realized that I should act fast, as I had no idea what the man's intentions were. I did not want to be alone on the train with him. It ended with me sitting completely still in my seat, then jumping up and sprinting out of the carriage onto the station just as the doors closed. Taking a quick glance behind me as I ran away, I saw that the man was also in a hurry to get off, but luckily he didn't have time to before the train moved on. From there, I ran the whole distance home in fear of meeting him on the way, as there are short distances between the last 2 stops. Here, obviously, the adrenaline did me a big favor since my fitness these days were not great. I luckily made it home safely and quickly agreed with myself that I would never again go out alone on the evening during COVID at least, and likely on other nights as well. I used to work at Walmart for a span of 6 months. I have a number of stories, mostly funny things that happened. However, one of the strangest and kind of creepy things still puzzles me today. So, at Walmart, I mostly stocked shelves, especially later at night. I'd start work and then the store would close, and I'd work basically an overnight shift. But Walmart is open until 11 p.m., so when I would first get there would still be people there. One time, not too long after starting, the store was basically dead, but still open. We were closing in a bit, and I was all by myself in an aisle in the grocery department. I had several large boxes of products that I was putting onto the shelves. As I was doing this, I remembered that this guy came into the aisle that I was in. I didn't bat an eye, but I knew that somebody was there. This guy, though, walked over to me and then stood right behind me, but didn't say anything. I turned around and saw this guy with bleached blonde hair looking like he was straight out of 1999 or something. He was kinda skinny and wore a yellow and green shirt. He asked me where the eggs were. I told him that they were 2 aisles down and pointed in the direction. Then the man walked off that way. That was where the dairy products were, and despite the guy looking kinda strange, it was a pretty normal interaction. So I continued work, now by myself. About 2 or 3 minutes later, an egg came flying over the aisle next to me and landed on the ground and broke. It had landed just a few feet away from where I was. I stopped working and looked around. I didn't see anyone, but then another egg came flying over. This one hit the ground and broke just a few feet away from me, even closer than the last one. I knew right away what was going on. The guy who I had told where the eggs were was now tossing them at me. Most likely this was some kind of a prank. I looked around, wondering if I was being filmed for a reaction or something. However, I did not see anybody within view of me at all. As I was looking, another egg came flying over and hit the ground. Then I ran out of the aisle to see who was doing it. As soon as I got towards the end of the aisle, I heard somebody running away. I made it around to the next aisle and just barely saw that same guy running off. There did not appear to be anybody with him, so it seemed as though he acted alone. I tried to keep chasing after him. I jogged over and yelled at him to stop, but of course he didn't. He only went faster and got farther away from me, and before long, he was lost. I couldn't just chase him all the way around the store as much as I wanted to. I was kind of angry about it, but I just went back though. Then I cleaned up the eggs on the ground in my aisle. If he did it again, there would be real problems. After cleaning, I went and found my supervisor and let him know what had happened, and to keep an eye out for the guy. Then I went back to work. For the rest of my shift, I didn't see the guy, and things were fine. I got off work early the next morning, and it was still dark out. So I left the store and then walked out to my car in the parking lot. When I arrived at it, I saw that it had been egged. There were eggs smashed all over my windshield, roof, and doors. I was really ticked off. I knew that same guy had got me again. I got in and drove straight to a car wash and got it looking nice again. But as I was driving home, I realized, how did that man know which car was mine? There would really be no way of knowing that information, unless of course he either watched me get in or out of it or something like that. That made the whole thing seem that much weirder to me. And why did the guy do that in the first place? It wasn't for some prank YouTube or TikTok video. This seemed to be for his own amusement. I never saw that guy again when working there. I saw some strange people in my time working at Walmart, but I will always remember that guy as the strangest. This happened back on the last day of school one year. I was in high school and it was the final day of sophomore year. It had been a fun school year, and the last day of school is always fun. Everybody's in a good mood, and I remember that I was talking to all my friends. When the school day had ended, I did not ride the bus home, but instead decided to walk back. That way I could stay at school longer and talk to my friends some more. I was talking with Sydney, who was my best friend, as well as a couple of other girls. Then, probably 20 minutes after school had ended, I started to walk back home. I had walked home occasionally throughout the school year. It was only about a 15-minute walk to get back because I lived pretty close by. The city that the school was in was pretty average, but the way back home was on a few sidewalks and through a park. In that area was a lot of trees, not necessarily a woods, but a good number of trees and other plants. So when I was walking back, there was really nobody else walking besides me. I started to notice footsteps a ways behind me about halfway back home though. This was just before entering the park. I didn't really know who it was. After getting into the park, I looked behind me, but the path was curved, so I couldn't see the person at all because they were out of view and too far back. I continued walking and wasn't really worried or anything. When I got to a straightaway, I continued hearing the person. After making it to the end of the park, right when I got back to the sidewalk, I decided to look behind me again. When I did, I suddenly heard and just barely saw somebody run off the trail and behind a few trees and bushes. This struck me as very suspicious, because if they were just a regular person walking, then why would they dart off like that, like they were trying to hide from me? I stopped and watched for a few seconds, but they did not come back into my view. So I turned and continued walking, except now I was concerned. They were probably almost 100 feet back, and I had seen them for like a split second. I couldn't tell who it was, but it definitely looked like a man. I was wondering if it was a guy that maybe I knew from school and he was joking around or something. That just seemed unlikely though. As I kept walking, I looked back a few more times. I was pretty close to my street now, but I didn't see whoever had been following me. It's like they stopped where they were when they had gone off the path at the end of the park. I thought that maybe me discovering them scared them off and they were not going to follow me anymore. That is, if they were in fact following me in the first place. I walked back pretty fast and decided to just try to make it home and not look behind me anymore. I was just going to scare myself if I did. So I walked the rest of the way back home and didn't notice hearing any footsteps behind me. When I arrived back, I went inside and was home by myself. My parents were still at work, which was typical for a school day. They were due back home at about 5:30 or 6, so I'd be home alone for a few hours. After making it back inside, I felt a great relief that I was no longer outside walking. I had never felt scared or in danger all the other times that I had walked home from school, not until this day. I looked out of the front window of the house, just curious as to who had been following me. I was kind of making sure that the person had gone, but then I saw someone. There was a man walking down the street who came into my view. He was on the sidewalk and I didn't recognize him as a neighbor or anything, but I did recognize him as the guy who darted off the path when I had spotted him. I hadn't seen the guy's face before, but I had seen the basic colors of the clothes that he was wearing, and this was the same. The man looked to be fairly young, but certainly no high school kid. As he walked down the street, he didn't seem to do anything too suspicious. He ended up going past our house and down the street. I felt much better at that point. Whether he had been intentionally following me or not, it seemed as though he didn't know which house was mine. I went away from the window and then unpacked my school stuff for the year. Then, about an hour later, as I was hanging out inside, I heard a knock on our front door. I was not near the door, but I had a bad feeling about it. I walked into the other room and sort of had a view. I saw the same guy standing there. Instantly, I was freaked out. I went back to the other room and called my mom in a panic. She told me to call the police if I felt in danger. I went back over to the edge of the room to see the guy. He knocked again, stood around, and appeared to be looking around as well. Then he finally walked away. I went over to the window and watched him walking off down the street. I did not call the police now that he was gone. My parents got home within the next hour and the man did not return. After that, I never saw him again. To this day, I wonder if he had stalked me home and what would have happened had I answered the door. Perhaps there was some kind of a logical explanation. I'm really glad that I didn't answer though. I worked at Costco as a cashier many years ago. I don't remember a whole lot from my time there, but overall it was a decent job. But one thing that I do remember is a weird and creepy thing that happened. I was working one night, and I had been there since the afternoon, and it was approaching the end of my shift. I was kept busy ringing up customers for basically the entire time. At one point, I remember glancing up to see the people in my checkout line. There was one lady who I was currently about to scan her items, and then another woman in line behind her. The next woman in line did not appear to have a cart, and I really didn't gather any information other than that. So I scanned the items for the one lady and then looked up and realized that the other woman was now gone. I wasn't sure why she got out of my line, but I didn't really care either. Pretty soon somebody else got in my line instead, and I continued working. Maybe like 5 minutes later though, as I was looking around, I noticed the woman who had been in line earlier was standing a ways back from the line. She was sort of off to the side, but standing near the checkout still. She was not holding anything and just kind of looking in my direction. For whatever reason, it struck me as odd. I just looked away though and kept working. It was maybe 10 minutes later when I saw the woman again. She was still there, not in the exact spot, but in the same general area, and still kind of looking at me. Now, I wasn't really giving it much thought at this point, but if I had to guess then, I would have guessed that she was maybe waiting for someone or something like that. The next time that I saw her was maybe 30 minutes later. This time though, she was standing on the other side of the checkouts. She was kind of by the cafeteria and near the walkway to the doors to leave. Once more, she was not holding anything and kind of facing me, looking around. I didn't really know what to make of this, so I didn't. I just kept working and ignored her, but I was off a very short time later. I noticed her in that area one more time, and then when I was finally done with work, I remember leaving my check lane. She didn't seem to be there as I was walking away. I punched out, got my things, and then headed for the exits to leave. I had parked kind of in the far back of the parking lot. By now it was nighttime, and things around there were a little quieter. So like 10 seconds after I had made it outside into the parking lot, I heard this voice to my left. I looked over and I saw the same woman again. She was looking at me and standing in the shadows kind of next to the building at the end of it. She sort of whispered and waved me over to her. I was confused, so I walked over to her to see what the deal was. As I got close to her, she said, "Come here." Then she turned and started jogging around the building, heading for the back of it. Back there was nothing really other than where the trucks made deliveries, and beyond that was a woods. I started to walk over to her, but I wasn't going to run. She gave me no explanation at all. She continued running, and after making it a short ways, I was sketched out and stopped. When the woman noticed this, she stopped too. She told me to hurry up and follow her. I loudly asked why and didn't move. The woman told me to be quiet and just follow her. Then she continued quickly going towards the back of the building. I was too creeped out now. This was enough for me to know that I shouldn't be following her, so I just turned around and walked away back to the parking lot. I could hear the woman start to turn around and then jog back towards me. So then I started jogging, but towards my car. I got there and quickly went inside. When I did, I saw the woman standing about 15 feet away from my car. She was still waving at me, trying to get me to go near her. I just ignored her and drove home. After that, I never saw her again. I'm not sure what exactly she was doing. Why was she looking at me for so long in the store? And what would have happened if I had followed her? Was she setting me up to be robbed or kidnapped? I'm really glad that I just left. I live by myself, and my house is out in the country a little bit. I haven't lived here for that long, about 2 years now. The backyard to my house is very large, and there's a big woods taking up most of it. One night when I was at home by myself, the weather was very nice. I opened up a back window to get a bit of a breeze in the room that I was in and to cool it down. Sometime later on in the night, with the window being open, I heard a noise coming from what sounded like the edge of the woods. I walked over and then looked outside, thinking maybe another deer was in my yard. What I saw instead shocked me. I saw a man fully dressed as a clown from head to toe sprinting through the woods. He briefly came out of the woods just in front of the trees before darting back in. The guy was running extremely fast, like a full sprint. He never looked over at me or my house, and I could see the long green hair from the clown mask blowing in the wind. After making it past me, he continued through the woods, now way out of my sight. I was left in shock at what I had just seen. It was probably a total of like 3 seconds that I saw the guy because he was running so fast. I was wondering why, but I was also wondering where did he come from and where was he going. I didn't have any prankster neighbors that I was aware of or anything. I kept watching out the window for a good amount of time, but I never saw the clown come back and I didn't hear anything either. Maybe an hour or so later, I was still curious about it, so I decided to go outside. I walked out my back door and stepped into the yard. There was an open space of grass and my patio back there before it was pretty much surrounded by woods. When I got outside, it was very calm and quiet. I only heard the sound of the leaves blowing in the wind. I walked around the backyard and even took a few steps into the woods. I didn't hear or see anything strange at all. Apparently, it seemed as though the clown had just run through the woods in my yard and that was it. He hadn't left anything or done anything. I kept walking around my yard, and I soon got to the side of my house. From there, I can sort of see my next door neighbor's house, even though it's a good distance away. I just remember that I looked over and I saw something in the window. On the second floor, I noticed the clown. He was inside of the house and looking at me. It gave me the creeps to see. I was pretty sure that an older woman lived in that house, and I wasn't aware of anybody else who lived there. But I didn't think that it was her who ran through my yard or was pretending to be a clown. I had met her once, but I didn't really know her. I figured she maybe had somebody over, maybe a kid or grandkid who was messing with me. After that, I went back inside of my house. For the next few days, nothing strange happened, and I sort of forgot about the clown. But then I happened to be outside in the front door, and I saw my next door neighbor was out as well. I remembered what had happened, and I decided to talk to her. I walked over and I asked her if anybody else lived with her or was staying with her several days before. She said no. I told her about what happened with the clown and stuff. She told me that she had no idea what that would have been, because she was sure that nobody was in her house, and she also told me that she had been gone that night. When I heard this, it sort of freaked me out. I really didn't know how to explain it, and I still don't. Since then, I haven't seen the clown or anything. My neighbor still lives there by herself, and she hasn't found any clowns or guys living there too. I'm not sure if that clown guy broke into her house that night or what. Either way, it was very strange. This happened a long time ago. Back then, I lived in an apartment by myself. This would have been sometime in the early 2000s. So I was trying to call my friend one night on the home phone in my apartment. I had her number written down and had almost memorized it. My phone was kind of old and I didn't have caller ID or many modern functions. That wasn't a big deal to me though. So anyways, as I was dialing my friend, I must have dialed the wrong number, because when the call got picked up, I heard a man's voice. I knew that my friend lived alone like I did. Still, I asked if she was there, and the guy said that nobody by that name lived there. So I said that I was sorry and I must have dialed the wrong number. The man said he understood and it was okay. Then I hung up. I dialed again for my friend, and this time made sure to dial each number correctly. When the call went through, I got my friend and then I started talking to her. We were best friends and we talked on the phone almost every day, many times for hours. So when we were talking, I remember that I heard another call coming in, but I didn't bother to hang up and answer it. I talked with my friend for about an hour and then hung up. After that, it was sometime at night, maybe 9 o'clock or so. I got another call on my phone and picked it up. I heard a man on the other end and realized that it was the same guy who I had accidentally called earlier. He said hi and that he tried to call me before. I told him that the line had been busy. He said that after I called him, I sounded cute and asked if I wanted to go on a date with him sometime. He also said that based on my area code, he figured that we lived in the same city. I realized that the guy must have had caller ID. To me, this did not seem like a good idea. For one, his voice didn't sound very attractive to me. But also, for me being a young woman, I didn't think it was smart to go on a random blind date with a guy who I accidentally called the wrong number. I told him that I just didn't want to, and it was nothing personal, but I didn't know him. He tried to convince me, but I really didn't want to, and I was finding it to be increasingly awkward. Finally, the guy said he understood and then hung up. But apparently, he did not in fact understand, because he called me back like 10 minutes later. I answered because again, I didn't have caller ID, and I didn't know who it was that was calling me. When I answered the phone, he asked if I had changed my mind yet. I said no, it's been like 10 minutes. He said that he just thought he would ask, and I said, okay, goodbye now, and then I hung up the phone. Then I called my friend again, because I just had to tell her about the crazy thing that had happened. For the rest of the night, the man did not call. The next day, I was at work during the day like usual. I got back to my apartment and was having a normal night with no strange phone calls or anything. But at about 8 o'clock, there was a knock on my apartment door. I didn't know who it would be because I wasn't expecting anyone, and I wasn't thinking about the man in the moment who had called me previously. When I looked through the peephole, I saw a guy standing there. He just had a creepy look to him and gave me a bad feeling, and I'm not just saying that. I had not remembered the phone calls in that moment. I was about to answer the door when I saw the guy reach into his pocket. I was curious, so I kept watching. He took out a cell phone and then started dialing a number. Moments later, my phone rang. That's when I realized who it was. I walked over to my phone, and for some reason, I answered. The guy asked me if I was at home, and I said, "What's it to you?" The man told me to open my front door. That's when I knew for a fact who it was, and I told him to go away. He said that I should go out with him and give him a chance. I told him that if he didn't go away now, I was calling the cops. He got offended and then finally hung up the phone. I went to the peephole again thinking that he had left, but he hadn't. He was still there. Then he loudly banged on the door. I still didn't open it. He yelled at me, demanding that I let him in, but I still wouldn't do it. By this point, I was about to call the cops, but he finally turned and stormed off. That's when I looked out of the door again for a while and made sure that he had gone. And after he was out of sight, I looked out into the hallway just to make sure that he was actually gone. He was. I was extremely creeped out by the guy. I don't know how he knew exactly where I lived. I think that maybe he looked me up in the phone book. It was a very scary experience though. I'm in my 20s now, but this story happened back when I was only 12 years old. My grandmother and I used to go on yearly road trips across either our own country or the one next to ours, as we lived relatively close to the border. Well, on this occasion we decided to travel across our neighboring country. My grandmother had a friend in the more rural part of the country that she hadn't seen in a long time. After some planning, they figured out the best time for the two of us to make our trip. I was excited when my grandmother first told me about it. I had no idea where we were going, but the idea of going on a road trip was always fun. Fast forward a few months and we finally got in the car and left. The trip would take approximately a week. My grandmother wanted to see all the neat stuff along the way, and traveling with a child such as myself requires a lot of pit stops. I wasn't necessarily a bad traveling companion, but I just had a small bladder. Anyways, we were on the last stretch of the trip when my grandmother had to pull into a gas station to fill up. We were practically running on fumes, and I really had to use the bathroom. We pulled into this middle-of-nowhere gas station, and after my grandmother had filled up the car, we hurried inside so that I could use the restroom. The moment we walked in, alarm bells in my brain went off. I had no idea why I was feeling that way until I set eyes on the clerk. I'm not usually to judge a person by how they present themselves, but this guy looked like a serial killer or something. We were in the center of rural territory, and this man was really giving me the creeps. I really don't know how to explain it other than that. The worst part was that he was smiling this really creepy smile and looking at me and my grandmother. I think my grandmother could sense the creepiness from the guy as well, and I remember that she went up to him and paid for the gas and asked for the key to the washroom, which he took his time to get. She walked with me to the washroom, which was disgusting, and I quickly did my business and we returned the key. Here's where things got worse. We got back into the car, and the man closed the shop and then got into his car. Sure, he was super creepy, but he hadn't done anything too odd yet, until we were supposed to arrive at my grandmother's friend's place. When we left the gas station, the clerk, who had just closed the store in the middle of the day for some reason, followed us. At first, we assumed he was just heading in our direction and was on the road after all. But after a really long time of him still tailing us, my grandmother finally realized that we were being followed. The man proceeded to follow us for 12 hours. My grandmother refused to stop driving unless it was an absolute emergency. She didn't have a phone, and despite somewhat knowing where she was, it was unknown territory for her that she was driving through. Therefore, she waited to get familiar surroundings so there wasn't the risk of getting lost while trying to find a police station. We finally made it to the city where her friend resided, and that was when we finally pulled into a police station. The man had pulled up next to our car just as we headed inside the building, and he watched us. I don't know what he was thinking, but he sat there while my grandmother talked with the lady at the desk. Thankfully, the cops handled the creepy man with ease, and I'll never forget the smile that left his face when the police approached him. Needless to say, that was the last time that we road tripped through that specific country's rural area, and one of the last times we took a road trip in general together, sadly. This happened on a November evening in 2016. I was at the Munich airport where I had a layover going to Milan where I live. There should have only been a half-hour layover, but my flight got more and more delayed. I realized that it would be past midnight before I got home now. When I finally arrived in Milan, I considered whether to take a bus or a taxi since it was late, but I ended up taking the bus because a taxi would be much more expensive and it was a short bus ride. Fortunately, I live centrally in the city and not alone, but it was about 1 a.m. and my roommates would be asleep for sure. When I got to the central station, I went to the bus stop where the city bus runs. My place was only 2 stops away, and I thought that it would be safer than walking all the way home. There was a sketchy gang at the bus stop, but I went there anyways and waited for the bus. I've done this at nighttime in other places before, and every other time it had gone well. The bus arrived and I got on. I felt very alone as a woman because there were mostly just other men who sat quietly and didn't say anything. There were only 2 other women on the bus, but they seemed drunk or to be on drugs. After a short trip that felt long, I could finally get off. I chose not to have music in my ears for the walk so that I could hear if somebody was following me. I had only a light bag with me, so walking was easy. It took about 5 minutes to walk to the apartment. The streets were unusually quiet. Usually there's foot traffic, but now there was not a single car or person to be seen. It was completely quiet, and all the traffic lights were on green. I crossed the road, followed the street straight down, and turned left where my apartment was. I reached the front door that leads into the common hall. The door is always locked, so only those who have keys to the apartments on the block can enter. I hadn't heard a single sound except for small raindrops and my own footsteps, but still, I turned my head to the left as I was about to unlock the outer door and saw exactly what I was afraid of. A man came walking. I never heard his footsteps. He had a normal walking speed, but the fact that he was walking like that made me uncomfortable. I put the keys in and unlocked the door. The man, who I hoped was only passing by, lined up behind me and was ready to enter. Him not saying anything made me even more uncomfortable. I tried to ask if he lived there, just to get him to say something, but he didn't answer. I didn't dare refuse him entry or say anything further, because I was scared that he would become violent or that he might live in the apartment and had forgotten his keys and it was a coincidence. We both went inside, and I quickly walked towards the stairs and acted natural. The stairs go up to the right, and I turned my head discreetly to the right before going up. The man was still standing at the entrance, and he closed the exit door slowly behind him as if he didn't want anybody to hear. I went up the stairs as fast as I could up to the second floor where I lived. The lock on the door that I was going to unlock from my apartment was a bit tricky, and typically enough it must be twisted around for a bit. I tried to insert the key silently so that he wouldn't hear where I was. When I put the key in the door, I was quiet, listening to hear if there were footsteps from the man down there, but I heard nothing. I creeped over to the railing and looked down, and there he was, still on the bottom floor. He looked up at me, and he was suddenly smiling now, pointing at me, and then he started slowly walking while holding my gaze. Of course, I got even more scared, and I jiggled with the lock at the door, but I couldn't get it open. I took a break from trying to work on my lock and called one of my roommates, but there was no answer. I could see the man now heading towards me. I kept standing there, and I managed to hide that I was scared. He got near me and just stood there and then looked at me. I managed to get out a hello in English just to get him to talk, but again, he didn't answer. He just stood there looking at me like he was waiting for me to open the door. The key was in the door, and I finally managed to open it. Thank goodness my friend must have heard or seen that I had called her phone, or maybe heard me struggling with the lock. She was right on the other side of the door once I unlocked it, about to open it for me. I believe that the man suddenly realized that I did not live alone, and then he walked away from our door back down the stairs. I sent a text to my employer about the man, who also owned the flat that we lived in, and she told me to contact the police. I began to think about if maybe that man was a murderer, and he could be out in the hallway waiting for possibly a victim, and I would feel really guilty for letting him into the building. It took 30 minutes before the police arrived. The man was gone when they got there. He was nowhere to be seen in the building, and we never saw him again. I honestly don't know what the man wanted. Maybe he was just a homeless person who wanted a place to sleep. After all, he didn't do anything to me. But if this had been a murderer or something like that, it would have been easy for him to overpower me into my apartment once I opened the door if I lived alone. Nobody would have heard or seen me, so I'm glad that my roommate had come to the door, because maybe he would have tried something if he hadn't seen her there. This happened on the last day of college classes one year. I went to a large university in a pretty typical college town. I had a group of friends and lived with 2 other roommates, Sarah and Courtney, in an apartment. We had a lot of other friends in our friend group as well. So after we had all finished our finals on the last day of school, everybody was going out. I'm not really a huge drinker, so I never really have more than a couple of drinks on any occasion, but I still would go out with friends and have a good time. So that afternoon, when everybody was done with classes, we went to a friend's house to hang out. This went on into the night, and then we started going to bars. We went to one, and many other college students were there as well. It was fun, but as the night got later, things got crazier. It turned into a pretty classic college night out. The bars were crowded, almost everybody got drunk, and we ended up going to several different bars. People would hang out at one, then walk to another nearby one. It was hard to keep track of where everybody was. Some of my friends were still at the previous bar, most were at the current one that I was at, and some went to another. Once it got past midnight, a few people started to go home. I was hanging out and talking to some people at one of the bars where I think most of my friends were. I know that Sarah was there, but Courtney had gone to another one. I heard that some people were at a different bar, and I liked that one better, so I decided to walk there. It wasn't that far away, and as I was going there, I got a phone call. I looked and saw that it was from Courtney. I had not seen her in a while, and I wondered what she was doing, so I answered the phone. When I did, she said, "Help." She sounded very upset. Then she asked if I could come and get her. I asked what was wrong, and then she hung up the phone. Now, I knew that Courtney had been a little bit drunk, so I was concerned for her, and I tried to call her back because I didn't know where she was. When I called her though, she did not answer. Then she sent me a text which was her location. I put it in my GPS, and it was about a 10-minute walk from where I was, so I decided to go there. I didn't recognize the place. It was not a bar, but it appeared to be a house. I walked there by myself, which definitely was a bad idea, but I wasn't with anybody at the time. So when I got there, it was a dark and quiet street, but it looked like a pretty typical college neighborhood. A lot of smaller, older houses, all pretty close to one another. I saw where her location was, and it was inside of the house. I didn't know who lived there, so I didn't know why Courtney would be there. Now I was feeling pretty nervous. I walked up to the front door, and in doing so, I noted that all the lights in the house appeared off. Could this have been a mistake? I tried calling her again, but was sent directly to voicemail immediately. When I got to the door, I saw that it was already open. I looked inside the front door and pushed it open a little. It creaked, but I heard nothing inside. There were no noises of anybody talking or anything. It was almost like the house looked abandoned. I stood there in the doorway looking and listening for a good minute or so. I just felt like it was a bad idea to walk inside, but Courtney was supposedly in there and I needed to help her. Then I suddenly heard footsteps. I saw a male figure walking through the darkness inside. He was very quickly walking straight for me. I just turned around and sprinted away from there. I ran off out of the yard and into the street and then across the street. I heard the guy going out of the doorway and starting to run after me. I cut through the neighbor's property across the street and I even hopped the fence. Then I went to the next street over and ran down it for a while. By that point, I felt like I had lost the guy. I didn't hear him, and when I looked around, I didn't see him either. I wasted no time and I dialed 911. I told them of what happened and I thought that my friend needed help. So I waited there, and about 10 minutes later, a police car arrived. He went to the house and then knocked on the door. A while later, Courtney came to the door crying. I was glad to see her again. I found out all the crazy details a short time later. She said that a guy at the bar had been talking to her. Somehow he convinced her to let him give her a ride to another bar. But he didn't go to another bar. Instead, he drove to the house. Then another guy was there and they forced her to go inside. They would not let her leave and forced her to call me and tell me to go there too. The guys then sent the location text to me and took her phone away from her. She was held in one of the rooms against her will and thankfully not harmed, but was threatened. I guess they had seen me with her and wanted us both. What the plan was after I got there, I guess, was to make me go inside and kidnap us. It came awfully close to happening, but I'm glad that it didn't. After I got away, both guys left the house. However, they did not return. The men ended up being located and caught a while later. The house was not theirs, but belonged to a friend who had just moved out. It was such a crazy experience. I'm very happy that Courtney is okay and that I did not go into that house. I went to Walmart really early one morning at about 6:30 a.m. For those who don't know, most Walmarts open at 6 o'clock in the morning, so I was going there at a good time because the store probably wouldn't be that busy yet. This was before work for me and not too long after I got up. When I went inside the store, indeed it was pretty quiet. There were a good amount of workers though. As I made my way around the store, I was not there for that long, but I was there long enough to see this one guy who struck me as pretty strange. Because I remember as I was walking past some aisles, the guy was walking towards me from the other way. When he got closer, I could see that not only was he not wearing any shoes, but he had these really wide eyes. It was like he was opening them as wide as he possibly could. He was not looking at me at first, but when I got closer, he started to look at me. It just looked very strange. Other than that, the guy had sort of long blondish colored hair and was wearing a black t-shirt and black pants. He kept his eyes on me as I passed, and I looked away. I started shopping around for what I needed and hoped that I wouldn't see the guy again. However, when I was leaving the aisle to walk away, I saw him again. This time he was walking back in the direction that he had originally come from. He did basically the same thing as before and was staring at me with really wide eyes. Overall, the guy just looked very unsettling. Maybe he was on drugs or something. I left the Walmart and then went back home before going to work. As the day went on, I forgot about the strange man. Obviously, I didn't think I would ever see him again. Now, I can't remember why, but I had to go to Walmart again that night. I must have forgot to buy something the first time that I was there or something. Maybe the guy had creeped me out and caused me to forget. I just know that I went back to that Walmart that same night at like 9 or 10 o'clock. It was pretty late. I was just getting like one thing. When I was inside there though, I saw the same man again. He was wearing exactly the same thing, including no shoes. He walked down the same aisle that I was in with the same wide eyes. I was so shocked to see him again and also creeped out that I just left. I stopped what I was doing, put back what I was going to get, and just walked right out of the store. I haven't been back to Walmart since. This story takes place a couple of years back. I was living with my good friend and roommate Jessica at the time. We both had Costco memberships and would shop there together for the house roughly once a week. So one time when we went there, we shopped around for all the stuff that we needed. It was pretty busy like it usually is there, so it took a while to get everything. By the time we were done, we had a cart full of items. We were also pretty hungry. Costco has a food court that is known for having some great deals. After we were shopping, I went to get a hot dog and Jessica said she wanted a pizza slice. I told her I would get them and she said she would go to the car and start loading it up. So she left and I got in line at the concession stand. After ordering and getting the food, my hands were pretty full. I was holding a hot dog, a pizza, and a drink as well. It was just exactly right then when I felt my phone vibrating in my pocket from getting a call. I could not reach it at the moment, and I figured that I would just see who it was and call them back when I got to the car. So I walked out of the Costco and then into the parking lot. When I did, I headed for where we had parked, which was pretty far away. But when I arrived where the car was, it was just gone. It was like Jessica had left without me. I was so confused. At first, I thought that I was in the wrong spot, and I looked around the parking lot. Then I noticed a man walking towards me from about 50 feet away farther into the parking lot. He wasn't near any cars, and something about him gave me a bad feeling, so I started to walk away. I went to another row, thinking possibly I had confused where we parked. The car wasn't there either, so I went to another row. It wasn't there either, and then I noticed the same creepy guy had followed me to that row as well. By now, I was creeped out and frustrated. My phone started vibrating once again, so I quickly walked back for the Costco. I got back inside, sat down at a table in the food court, and set everything down. I looked around, and the man had not followed me in. When I looked at my phone, I saw several missed calls from Jessica. I quickly called her back. She answered right away and said that she had to leave. She said when she was loading the car, some creepy guy approached her. He tried to enter her car, and she was able to get inside and lock the doors without him getting in. But he kept trying the door, so she drove away. That's when she called me the first time to warn me and let me know. She was going to drive around and then pick me up, but I hadn't seen her call. I told her that I had seen the man as well and that I was back inside Costco now. So then I reported the guy to a Costco employee. Then when Jessica reached the doors, I quickly went outside and got into her car. Then we drove away. When we did, we saw the man standing around randomly in the parking lot. We were glad to make it out of there. That was the scariest experience that I ever had going to Costco. I used to work at Costco. I did a little bit of everything in my time there. At one point, I would stock shelves and that sort of stuff. That's what I was doing one evening when I was at work at the Costco. The store really wasn't busy that day, or at least not at that point in the day. I remember that I was walking past sort of near the front of the store near where the checkouts are. At our Costco, there was this upper level past there on the end. It was a walkway that led to some offices. When I glanced over, I saw a man walking up there, and I was 90% sure that he didn't work there. Only employees are allowed up there for obvious reasons, so I kept an eye on him and hoped that he would leave. After watching him though, he was standing around and just watching people shop. Then he was kind of pacing around up there, and I knew that he didn't work there and wasn't supposed to be up there. However, nobody else seemed to notice him. I continued with my work, but I also continued to watch the guy. Then I saw him toss something down to the ground below towards a shopper. I think it was a bottle cap. At that point, I knew that I had to do something about it, so I started to walk over to the guy. I didn't look at him, but I went straight over to the stairs. They had a barrier blocking people from going up that said employees only. I went up, and when the guy saw me, he tried to go into the room that was up there, but the door was locked. Then he walked over towards me, and I told him that he needed to get down and leave. He claimed that he was lost, which was the stupidest defense ever. So the guy did go back down, but did not leave the store. He quickly walked away from me and was soon out of sight. I figured that he would not go up there again though, and hopefully learned his lesson. Then I went back to work. For the next several hours, I worked stocking shelves all around the store. I was working until a little bit past close that day. Costco closes relatively early for a store that sells everything. I think they close at like 8 p.m. if my memory is correct. So I was probably working that night until about 8:30 or 9. After close, the store obviously emptied out other than employees. There was still a good amount of employees around. So it was maybe 10 or 15 minutes after closing time, and I remember hearing the sound of like 2 women screaming a little ways away. I stopped what I was doing and I walked over there to see what was going on. When I was over there, I saw the same man from earlier. He was getting out of this clothing bin. We had a clothing section at the Costco, and there was this one really large bin with a bunch of jeans in it. They were just kind of piled in, and the man then took off running, sprinting to the other side of the store. Somebody said they were calling the police, and then I saw another one of my coworkers go running in the direction of the man. I asked what happened, and I was told that the man had been hiding buried in the jeans and out of people's sight. After closing time, he emerged when one of my coworkers was organizing the jeans, and they were obviously not expecting to see him, which spooked them. Then obviously he had taken off running, but not to leave the store. He was now running around deep in the store. The police ended up arriving. They searched the entire Costco and found the man hiding. When he refused to leave, they arrested him for trespassing and he got banned. It turns out he didn't even have a membership. Doesn't surprise me. I'm not sure what his plan was or what he was trying to do, but it was really crazy. This happened when I was in my first year of college. I was 18 and I took the city bus to and from school every day. I felt very safe on the bus because it was a line for the college in my town, so it was pretty much mostly ridden by college students. After the bus, I had about a 10-minute walk from my stop to my house. One afternoon, I got out of class and rode the bus home. I got off at my stop and walked my normal route home. I had just gotten onto the street I lived on when a man in a new-looking black truck pulled up next to me. The man was white, chunky, and probably in his late 20s or early 30s. He rolled down his window and asked me where something was. I had my headphones on, and even though I could still kind of hear his question, I pulled them out and asked him to repeat the question. He then asked me where something else was, and not whatever previous location he had said before I pulled out my earbuds. I thought it was weird, but the longer we talked, the more I realized he was not genuinely asking for directions. He then started asking me, what is there to do in this city? I'm new here. To which I told him I don't know and there really isn't much to do. I told him there's a mall and that's about it. I kept walking while we had this conversation and he drove slowly next to me. We were getting closer and closer to my house and I was getting uncomfortable. I tried texting my dad that there was some guy talking to me and I was feeling weird, but I noticed that my dad's truck wasn't in the driveway so he wouldn't be much help. The man then asked me if there was a movie theater at the mall and I said yes. He asked me what movies I liked and I said I didn't watch movies. He then asked me what TV shows I liked and I said I didn't watch TV. Both of those statements were false, but I was trying to shut him down. He then asked what I did for fun and I said I was a student. I tried to hint at the idea that I might still be in high school to see if the possibility of me being young might deter him, but he still pursued. He offered to take me on a date to go see a movie. By this point, we were way past my house. I obviously didn't want him knowing where I lived. He offered to come and pick me up the following Saturday, and I said no, just flat no. He then tried to tell me that I was really pretty and asked if I had a boyfriend. I said no, I was a student, and that I didn't have time for a boyfriend or to date. I once again tried hard to imply that I might still be in high school to try to protect myself, assuming he wasn't a total pedophile who wasn't afraid to date underage girls. He finally got the hint about me being in high school and said, "Really, I thought I saw you getting off the college bus. All right then, have a good day." Clearly, he had been following me since I got off the bus. I had been walking almost 10 minutes by that point. Honestly, he could have even followed me from my college 30 minutes away, since my bus is a city bus of course, and its main stop was just the college. Anyone can get on that bus, and unless you're familiar with the bus lines, you wouldn't know that the bus is ridden by college students. I circled around the block to make sure that he wasn't still on my tail before I went home. I told my dad about it, and we drove around the block to see if it was somebody living in our neighborhood. Thankfully, his black truck wasn't parked at any of the neighbors' houses. I didn't have any other choice but to continue riding the bus to and from school every day, and thankfully I never saw that man again. This happened one night like 5 years ago. I had just finished work and it had been a pretty long day. I worked at a restaurant at the time and it was open pretty late, so I didn't get off of work until nearly midnight. After leaving, I began the drive back home, which usually took about 10 minutes. I lived in a quiet town, and the roads back to my house were pretty dark and quiet as well. Mostly there were roads with either farmlands or woods on both sides. As I got closer to my neighborhood, I was driving down a pretty quiet street near a wooded area. I saw a sign on the road that said, "Construction Detour." It was completely blocking where I had to go, and the sign had white and orange stripes. It was basically blocking off the entire street. So I couldn't go the normal way home that I always did. I had no idea why the road was closed or anything like that, but I wasn't using directions to get home or anything because I knew the way. The detour was pointing to the left, so I made the turn, and I figured that it would connect to another street that led to mine. After going down this road, it started to curve, and it was much quieter than the other. It was also heavily surrounded by forest. I drove down this road for maybe a quarter mile. There were a few narrow driveways that I passed by, but then I saw what looked like a dead end. This had to be a mistake. Why would this be a detour if it was a dead-end road? My headlights were the only light at all, and as I got closer to the dead end, I saw something. It was really just woods in all directions, but then I noticed this clown face looking at me, and then there was another and another. When I got closer to the end of the road, I saw about 10 people all wearing these creepy clown masks. They were all standing anywhere from 1 to 10 feet into the woods. It was like a herd of deer all looking at me as I approached. I was instantly creeped out. I slammed on my brakes on the narrow road. I wanted to turn around, and I knew that I needed to turn around, but there was no space on the road to do so. So I turned my car and then hit reverse, and then started going back and forth to slowly turn my car around with the small space that I had. As I was doing this, I saw some of the clowns start to emerge from the woods. A few of them began to walk in my direction. They were maybe 100 feet away from me, and I scrambled to go faster. Soon, the clowns started to jog after me. It was one of the creepiest things I've ever seen. By the time I finally got my car all the way turned around, they were now running at me. I quickly hit the gas, and at least 5 clowns were all sprinting towards my car. I got out of there before they caught up with me, and then went back to the other road. I didn't look back, and then I drove until I found a longer way around the area that led back to my neighborhood. Eventually, I made it back home, and I could not believe what had just happened. I didn't know how to explain it. The next day when I went to work, there was no roadblock or construction or anything. I was able to drive down the road that had been completely closed off, no problem. It makes me think that the signs were put there possibly by those clowns. Was it just a prank to scare people driving by, or was it something worse? What would have happened if those clowns had caught up with me? I don't know, but I'm glad I don't have to find out. I worked in the Walmart customer service area a few years ago. It was a job that was alright. I didn't love it or hate it. It was better than working as a cashier to me, which I did for a while until moving to the customer service. At our store, it was in the front, just past the check lanes. Most commonly, we would deal with returns and that sort of stuff. During this time period, I lived with a roommate in a house that we rented together. My roommate's name was Shirley, and we were friends. So one night, I was by myself working in the customer service area in Walmart. It was a quiet night, and we were going to be closing within the next couple of hours. I wasn't doing a whole lot anymore and was looking forward to going home soon. So then I remember seeing this guy come in holding a few Walmart bags. I figured that the guy was going to make some returns. He was wearing a large black t-shirt, jeans, and a backwards baseball cap. He also had a goatee and looked fairly young. The guy then dumped out the Walmart bags onto the counter and said that he was making a return. However, when I saw the items, I was very confused. Some were clothing and some were random household objects like a candle, a bottle of wine, and a blanket. None of the objects were in their original packaging though, and I soon realized that none of the items were sold at Walmart either. It was just random stuff. I continued to look at it, feeling very confused now. As I did, I saw something that made my heart drop. It was a picture frame with a picture in it that was of me and my sister taken when we were younger, and that's when I realized that all this stuff was my stuff. I stopped looking at it and then looked up at the man. I asked him, "Where did you get this stuff?" He just started laughing and then turned and walked away. I stood there frozen, not sure what to do. Should I chase after the man? Should I call the police? Should I do nothing? The man quickly went away, and then I looked at all the stuff again. Sure enough, it belonged to me and had been in my house. There were a few items that were not mine, but belonged to my roommate Shirley. I realized that somebody must have broken into our house or something. I got out my phone and called Shirley. She was not home, but was also at work like I was and had left for work shortly after I did that day. I told her about it. She was just as surprised as me. Then I told a coworker and then my manager. After she heard about it, she said they would look into it, and my manager told me I was allowed to go home early. I only had about an hour left of my shift anyways. I left and went home. For some reason, I didn't call the police at that point. When I arrived back, I parked my car and looked around. Everything seemed normal. There were no suspicious cars or people to be seen in the area. All the lights in my house appeared off, and nothing seemed to be out of place outside at a glance. So I got out of my car and walked to the front door. It was still locked, and I saw that the windows were not broken. I was, however, too nervous to go inside, so I walked all around the house, examining it. I didn't see any broken windows or anything, but when I got to the back door, I opened it and it was not locked. This really creeped me out, and I ran back for my car and got inside of it. Then I called the police. I waited for them in my car and watched my house, but nothing happened. The police arrived and I gave them permission to enter my house and search it. They did just that and found nobody inside. However, there were many missing things. My laptop, Shirley's laptop, her iPad, some money that we each had, jewelry, clothes, speakers, and some other stuff were stolen. They walked in the back door, which Shirley did not lock. This was scary enough as it was, but the fact that the guy walked right into the Walmart with, I guess, the stuff that he stole but he didn't want anymore was really creepy. We had him on surveillance video at the Walmart, but he did not appear to drive to the Walmart but just walk. They tried to identify him, but the security camera footage wasn't the greatest, and I don't think he was ever found. The whole thing still makes me scared to think about. Was the man trying to taunt me or something? I really hope that somehow he is caught. I don't live there anymore, and I don't work at Walmart anymore either. A couple of years ago, my husband and I took a road trip to Yosemite National Park. We didn't camp in the park, but we stayed outside of it at a hotel in a nearby town. One evening, while we were making the road trip back from the valley, I noticed that the headlights of our car caught what appeared to be somebody laying down on the side of the road with both feet pointed towards the street. I told my husband that there was a person laying there as we passed by. My husband told me that I was just seeing things and maybe it was a trash bag or something, but I was so certain I just kept telling him no. For the rest of the drive back, we argued about it, and by the time we made it back to the hotel, I seemed to change my husband's mind. I think he realized how adamant I was about it, and he believed me. He asked me if I was sure about it and if I wanted to go back. I said yes, I was very certain, so we drove back to the spot. We made it past, and I saw the person again, so we turned the car around. My husband then stopped next to the person and rolled down his window. He asked, "Are you okay?" There was no answer. One more time, even louder, he asked, "Are you okay?" Suddenly, a woman dressed in all black sat up. She was wearing a nice brown jacket, black pants, and had her purse and 3 water bottles. Her makeup was done nicely, and she seemed very sweet. I could tell that my husband was absolutely shocked. The woman looked to be in her late 40s, and I asked her where she was headed. She said that she was trying to get to the Chevron station up the road, and that her mom was going to meet her there to pick her up. I knew that something weird was going on, because where we found her and the Chevron station was still another 7 miles away. She said in her mind she thought it was only a mile from her hotel and that she could make the walk. We offered her a ride, and she climbed into the back seat. As we drove, we tried to ask her questions, mainly just chit-chat. I asked why she was laying on the side of the road. She said she had gotten tired of walking and just laid down, ready to give up. It was winter, and she had no hat or gloves with her. I could tell that she was very fragile. Once we arrived at the Chevron station, she thanked us, got out of the car, and sat on a bench in front of the closed Chevron station store. We offered to stay with her until her mom arrived, but she said she would be fine. I reminded her that there was no cell phone reception in the area, and triple-checked that she didn't want us to wait with her. She said no, and we drove back to our hotel at that point and noticed that there were now 2 police cars in the parking lot. They had not been there the first time that we arrived back from the valley that evening. I told my husband I knew they had to be there for that woman. I calmly walked over to one of the cars and asked if they were looking for a missing woman. The officer told me that they were and asked if I had seen her. I explained the situation and that I really felt like the woman had something very bad happen to her. He thanked us for picking her up and giving her a ride. He couldn't tell me what had happened, but thought that her leaving and going somewhere was a smart choice. I asked the cops to please go check on her at the Chevron station to make sure that she was okay and that her mom finally did arrive. I realized that whatever had happened at the same hotel we were staying at. That evening, I looked up the local police log and found that a domestic violence dispute had broken out at the hotel. The woman had been very badly beaten, and she was so terrified that she was willing to walk in the dark without a flashlight just to escape. It's my guess that after walking about a half-mile from the hotel, she was in so much pain that she needed to lay down. I got the feeling like she thought she might lay down and die there on the road. She couldn't go back to the hotel because she had already escaped and gone to the front desk to call her mom. Her husband knew she'd be there and would have to come and get her. The front office called the police for her while she escaped. It's my understanding that the man who hurt her was her husband and he was arrested. I always wondered about her, whether she went back to him. Hopefully not. I also hope that the cops ended up checking on her and that her mom did come and pick her up. I went to a university that was about an hour away from home. I lived in the dorms for my freshman year and my sophomore year as well. This takes place at the end of my sophomore year. On the last day of school, my plan was to drive back home, because we were supposed to move out of the dorms by the following day anyways, and because I only lived about an hour away. It was doable, and my roommate had packed up all her stuff and she moved out like right after finals were done. I didn't really have that much stuff at college with me, pretty much just my basic things like clothes and school supplies, as well as some other stuff. I spent some time with college friends in the afternoon, and then went back to the dorm in the evening. I began packing my stuff, which I should have done earlier, but it didn't really take that long. By the time I was done, I started bringing everything out to my car in the dorm parking lot. It was around sunset at this time, so the parking lot was quiet and mostly empty now. As I was carrying boxes and other things into my car, I was on like my 3rd or 4th trip to the car. I was struggling with some large boxes, and this random guy came up to me seemingly out of nowhere. He looked much older than most college students, and he asked to help me with the boxes. He took one, and I said thanks, and he put it in my car. The man then asked me where I was going. I said that I was moving out of the dorms and going home. He told me that he also went to the college. I believed him because even though he was older, people of any age can go to college. He stood around as I put the boxes in my car, but he didn't say anything else. Then I said that I was going to get more stuff. He asked if I needed help, and I said no thanks. So then the guy started to walk away. I went back up, got more stuff, and then came back out. When I got to my car again, I saw the man. He was standing far away at the other end of the parking lot, almost out of sight. He was standing sort of next to a car. I put my stuff in, and then had one more trip to make. By that point, my car was loaded up with stuff. I went back and then brought my final stuff out, and noticed that the guy was still in the same spot in the parking lot. He then got inside of the car that he was by over there. Before leaving, I went back into my dorm room to clean it. We were supposed to leave the room clean, and I didn't want to get in trouble. That didn't take me too long though, maybe 10 or 15 minutes. Then I left the dorms and went back to my car again. When I was getting into my car, I noticed that the guy's car was still there, and he appeared to be inside of it now. So then I texted my parents that I was leaving, and then I started driving back home. The exit to the dorm parking lot was on the other end, and I had to drive right by the guy in his car. I remember that right after pulling out, I saw him leave and pull onto the road behind me. I found this odd because he had been sitting there for such a long time for some reason. I drove off campus and then went through the town to the highway. The entire time, the guy stayed behind me. When he got onto the highway after me, I started to get worried about it. What if he was deliberately following me for some reason? I didn't want to think that that was a possibility, but what else was I supposed to make of it? I drove down the highway, which I would be driving down pretty much the whole way home. After I went for a good 30 minutes, I was getting much closer to being back, and the guy was still right behind me. By that point, I was really concerned. I saw a sign for a rest stop up ahead, so I decided to go there. If he followed me there, then there would be no mistaking that he was deliberately following me. I nervously took the exit, and the man behind me did the same. That's when I started freaking out. I pulled into a parking space, and the man parked like 2 or 3 spaces away from me. I didn't get out of my car, but I took out my phone and called my dad. I told him what was happening. Meanwhile, the man stayed in his car and did not get out, as I did the same. My dad answered, and when I told him what was happening, he told me to look up directions to the nearest police station and drive straight there. So I did just that, and then left the rest stop. As soon as I did, the man left as well. He followed me all the way to the police station, but he did not go into the parking lot when I did. He drove away instead. I parked in the police station lot for a while. I saw a cop, and I told him what happened. He was nice and offered to follow me back to the highway, which was only like a mile away from there. So I drove back and didn't see the guy. I got back on the highway and then made it home safely. I never saw that guy again. I'm pretty sure that he didn't even attend my college. I worked at a mall as a custodian years ago. I would describe it as a pretty average mall, but it was kind of small as well. Most of the time, I would work there after the mall closed doing various tasks, mostly cleaning and maintenance type of stuff. I would work really late at night and would get off at around midnight or so usually. Because the mall was kind of small, I was typically the only one working after close. The mall closed at 8 p.m., and one night after that I was working like normal. Sometimes it would feel a little spooky when it got really late at night. Being by myself in an entire mall was weird because it would get really quiet. So a few hours after close, at maybe 10 p.m., I remember that I heard what sounded like footsteps. They were not within my sight, and I could not confirm exactly what the sound was. However, nobody was supposed to be in the mall anymore at all, so therefore I should not be hearing anything. It made me wonder if somebody else was in there. I continued listening and heard the sound again a short time later. It definitely sounded like somebody was walking in a nearby hallway. I thought that maybe an employee who worked in one of the stores was just leaving. Occasionally, employees in stores would stay late. Never had I noticed anybody staying 2 hours late, though. So I just stayed where I was and continued working, assuming that if that was the case, they would just leave. Like 5 minutes later, I heard another sound. This was not somebody walking, though. I heard someone calling out, saying, "Hey." It sounded like a man. I yelled, asking who was there. He told me to come here. I started walking over to where the sound was coming from. I went to the end of the hallway that I was in and turned and went into another one. When I made it into that hallway, I did not see anybody there. I called out asking where they were, but nobody answered. Then I just walked around trying to figure out where this guy was. I heard him yell again for me to get there now, but I realized then that he had moved. His voice was definitely not coming from where it had been before. I didn't know what was going on or who he even was, but I kept going to try to find him. The way he was yelling made it seem like he might need help. But now he was seemingly running away from me as he was yelling, and this seemed suspicious. He called out again, now even farther away. I yelled, asking what was going on. By now I was frustrated and also creeped out. I walked around and the voice stopped altogether. Like I said, the mall was not that large. There's still a decent amount of hallways and places to go, but I eventually looked in all of them. The stores were all closed by now, obviously, so there was limited places for this guy to go. After searching pretty much the entire mall without finding the guy, I went back to work. I figured that he left, and maybe he was just some guy pulling a prank. I went around and made sure that all the doors were locked, which they were. Then I finished my work for the night. In the rest of the time that I was working, I was nervous and always looking over my shoulder, but I also didn't hear anything more, and I didn't see anything suspicious either. Really late that night, I left and went home. The next morning, I got a call from my boss. He told me that one of the doors to the mall had been propped open when he got there in the morning. Apparently, there was a rock propping open one of the doors. Thankfully, nobody was in the mall when he got there. I told him what happened with the noises I heard and stuff. Apparently, the guy must have never left. I really don't know where he had been hiding. When my boss heard this, he contacted the police and reported it. The mall got searched again, but nobody was found. I'm guessing that some guy hid in the mall after close, and then for some reason decided to yell at me. I still don't know what to make of it. He must have still been there the rest of the time that I worked, and then after I left to go home, he must have snuck out and left. Why he left the rock propping the door open, I'm not sure. Maybe he planned to come back. I still don't really know what to make of it, but being in that situation was one of the scariest moments of my life. This happened a couple of years ago. I went to Walmart one night to do some shopping. I go there all the time because I've always lived pretty close to a Walmart. They have cheap prices and a good selection of just about anything you could want. So when I got there, it was a little bit later at night, maybe 9 o'clock or so if I had to guess. The store wasn't that busy anymore as the evening rush had ended. So I took a cart and started shopping around, getting what I needed. As I had been shopping inside the store for maybe 20 minutes, I heard something strange over the store speakers. Normally they play music at a lower volume, but the music stopped. Then I heard somebody say my name, and I realized that someone was calling for me. I had no idea who would do this or why. It was like when you get lost as a kid, and your mom has them call you to the front of the store. I had not the slightest of ideas as to why they would be calling for me, but I was curious, so I headed up to the front of the store. I went to guest services, and there was a woman there who I talked to. I asked her why somebody called for me on the store speakers. She acted like it didn't even happen. I told her about it, and the woman said she didn't know what I was talking about. So either she wasn't paying attention, or she completely denied it. The voice had been a male's voice, though, so it wasn't her who had called me. The possibility of a prank crossed my mind, but I still didn't know of anybody who would do that. I just decided to continue on with my shopping. So I went back to where I had been, which was on the complete other end of the store. I didn't have that much more shopping to do. I finished up and then headed to the front of the store. There I used the self-checkout, paid for everything, and then left. In my entire time in the store, I hadn't noticed anything strange other than that call, and after it I paid closer attention to my surroundings. So as I stepped out of the store and I was walking to my car in the parking lot, suddenly my cell phone started ringing. I stopped and took it out of my pocket to see who was calling me. When I did, it was a number that I did not recognize. For some reason, I decided to answer it, and I'm glad that I did. I heard a man's voice on the other end. He said, "Hi," and then mentioned my name. I asked who he was because I didn't recognize the voice. He then said that he was currently inside of my car. I was really creeped out when I heard that. I asked again who he was, but he just hung up on me. I didn't want to go to my car and find out if he was bluffing or not, so I went back inside the Walmart. Then I called my boyfriend George, and he said that he would come to the Walmart. I waited inside and got another call from the number, but I didn't answer it. I was too creeped out. Finally, George arrived. He walked out to my car with me, and then carefully we looked inside. There was nobody in there. What was going on? Then I got another call. This time, George told me to answer it and put it on speaker. The voice said, "I can see you and your little friend." Whoever this was could clearly still see me. It had to be somebody in the parking lot. I told George that we should just get out of there. I quickly got inside my car, and George went back to his. Then George followed me when leaving. Nobody else followed us out of the parking lot, and I got back to my apartment safely. Then I blocked the number. After that, I never had anything strange like that take place. I'm not sure to this day who that was or what was going on there. I went to Walmart to buy some things one night. It was a little bit late, but I didn't mind. In fact, I probably preferred that because the store was much quieter and easier to shop around. After entering Walmart, I got a few things. By the time I was in the store for maybe 10 minutes, I was in the very back. I was in a quiet aisle buying some dog food for my dog Zeke. As I was there, this man started spying on me. I didn't notice him at first because it was kind of hard to tell, but when I looked to the end of the aisle, I saw this guy peeking around the corner. I could only see his head and part of his shoulder. The man was just staring at me and was also wearing sunglasses. I thought that maybe he was just messing around to be funny or something. After I noticed him, he had no reaction though. He didn't move away quickly or move into the aisle. He didn't smile or laugh either, so I just ignored him and kept shopping. The man stayed there. When I had the dog food, I put it into my cart and started to leave, but I went out the other end of the aisle. That's when the man finally moved. I didn't bother to go after him or anything, and I just kept shopping. Then I moved to another department of the store. I figured that I probably wouldn't see the guy again, but I was wrong. When I was over in the grocery department, I saw the man once more. He was just staring at me like he was trying to act creepy on purpose. I looked away and quickly ignored him. He was sort of far away from me, so I wasn't too nervous or anything. When I looked back to him again, he was still looking at me, but then quickly moved away. The guy was being a general creep, I would say. I kept shopping, moving locations again to another part of the store. I looked around and saw the man there again. He was sort of hiding behind one of the displays and looking at me. When he noticed that I saw him, this time he moved back behind the display really quickly and was out of my view. I didn't know what this guy's problem was. For the final couple of minutes that I was shopping, I didn't see the guy. I hurried up and went to the checkouts. I paid for my stuff and looked around, thinking that I would see the man again somewhere staring at me, but I did not see him at all. So either he was hiding really good or he had stopped spying on me. Either way, I got my stuff and quickly headed for the exits. When I had made it out of Walmart, I looked around carefully. I didn't see the man at all. I made it to my car, got inside, and then started it up. When I was driving away, I finally noticed the man again. He was hiding in a bush and staring at me with this creepy smile as I drove away. Obviously he couldn't chase me or anything like that, and I easily made it away from him. I was left wondering why he kept following me and acting so weird. I didn't go to that Walmart for a while. I wasn't trying to avoid him or anything, but I just didn't happen to go there. When I've been back since then though, I obviously haven't seen him. This happened a few months ago. I was hanging out at my girlfriend's apartment one night and I ended up staying kind of late. This happened all the time, but it wasn't a big deal because I only lived a few miles away. It was just under a 10-minute drive to get back to my place. By now, as you could imagine, the roads were very quiet. So that's how I noticed that I might be getting followed not long into the drive. I didn't know for sure, but I just remembered that a car was behind me and when I turned at one road, it did the same thing. I don't remember exactly when it started to follow me, and after the first turn, I thought nothing of it. The way back to my apartment though was not a straight shot and I had to turn a few times. For the next 3 turns, the car did the same as me. I just found this odd, and we were basically the only 2 cars on the entire road. The closer we got, the more I wondered if I was being followed. Of course, with it being late at night, I was probably just feeling slightly paranoid. I didn't actually seriously believe that I was being followed, but I was curious. Then I came to a stoplight. There was a red upcoming at an intersection. To that point, I had not been able to see who was behind the wheel of the car behind me because it was too dark. When I got to the intersection, there was a bit more light there. I looked back in my mirror and I saw who was driving. The guy looked like a clown. His face was painted and his hair appeared dyed red. He also had a red nose on. It wasn't a funny clown though, it just looked creepy. This was a bit unsettling because it was nowhere near Halloween time or anything. I didn't know why some guy would be out driving late at night looking like a clown. When the light turned green, I kept going with the clown still following me. We made another turn and I was a little bit more nervous. Soon we were approaching my apartment complex. It is several buildings with a large parking lot sort of in the middle. As I pulled into the lot, the clown did too. That's when I realized that I could not just park and try to go inside, so I kept going through the parking lot and then turned out at the next area. When I did this, the clown did not turn out of the parking lot, but kept going farther into it. I let out a sigh of relief. I got back onto the road, and I guessed that it was just a big coincidence, and for some reason somebody who lived at my apartment complex was dressed as a clown. They also happened to drive home right behind me the entire way. It was weird, but I figured I'd drive down a ways, come back, and then go inside. So I went to the end of that quiet street, then made a U-turn and headed back to the apartment complex. I made it back about 2 or 3 minutes after the clown would have arrived. I parked my car on the opposite end of the lot to where I had seen the clown going. He was nowhere in sight now, but there were a lot of cars there. After getting out of my car, I began walking for my apartment building. But that's when I saw the guy again. The clown was now walking on a sidewalk near the front of one of the buildings. When I saw him, I started to walk faster to get to my building. But when the clown saw me, it was like he was after me right away. He changed directions and was now headed for where I was. We were still a long distance away from each other though. I hightailed it for the side door of my apartment building. As soon as I started moving, I saw the clown start to run after me. This caused me to run as well. I went as fast as I could, and thankfully I was able to reach the door. I quickly went inside and made sure that the door shut behind me. Then I ran up the stairs to my floor. I didn't hear the door opening behind me, so I'm assuming that the clown did not get in. Then I went to my apartment and was finally home. I didn't get any knocks on my door or have anything strange happen, and since then I haven't seen that crazy clown. I wonder who it was though, and why the guy followed me. Did he know who I was, or was I just a random target? Obviously, I wouldn't probably recognize the guy if I saw him, unless of course he was dressed as a clown again. I'm hoping that nothing like that happens again. I used to work at a Subway restaurant years ago. There's one event that took place that I will never forget. It led to me eventually quitting because it was so crazy. So it all started one Thursday night when I was working. I had worked at the Subway for a while and was pretty experienced. We closed at 10 p.m. and I was working a closing shift on this night. I was also working by myself because things would be very quiet the last couple of hours generally. There were customers coming in and ordering subs here and there that night, but not too many. Overall, it was pretty quiet. I remember at about 9 p.m. I heard somebody enter and I went over to the bread area to take their order. It was a man who I remember had dark brown hair as well as a beard. He was wearing a beanie hat and a sweatshirt and jeans. He walked up and started ordering like normal. I don't remember what exactly he got, but it was a pretty typical foot-long sub. Nothing really stood out about the guy except he seemed sort of confused at what he wanted sometimes. He changed his mind on several occasions and asked for extra of a few things. When the sandwich was complete, I moved over to the end of the counter at the cash register. After I wrapped the sub, I told the guy his total and I entered it into the register. That's when the man told me that he didn't have any money at all. I stopped what I was doing and looked at him. He went on to say that since the sandwich was already made, I may as well give it to him for free. I wasn't going to do that though. I said no, and I told him I wasn't going to give him anything for free. And looking back, I don't regret it at all. If the man went through all the trouble of ordering knowing the whole time he didn't plan on paying, he shouldn't have come in at all. The guy asked me again, and I could tell that he was getting angry, but I still said no. I was nervous of how he would react, and at first he seemed fine. The man stopped talking and then turned and just walked right out of the restaurant. I was glad that he was gone. However, less than 30 seconds later, the door opened again and the man walked back inside. This time he was walking very quickly like he was on a mission. He walked right up to the counter where you order. Then he jumped up, turned, and with both feet kicked the glass divider that goes in front of the food about as hard as he could. It was one of the craziest things I've ever witnessed. It caused the man to fall to the ground. Thankfully, the glass did not break, but the shelf of chips that went along the front of it did break and all the chip bags fell to the floor. The man quickly got up from the ground, yelled a curse word, and then started walking over to the end of the counter. This is where you would enter to go behind the counter to where the employees only area was. I didn't want to take any chances and I went to my right and into the back room. As I got back there, I glanced behind me and I saw that the man was in fact heading behind the counter. I didn't know if he was coming after me or not, and I knew that I needed to get away. So I went through the back room to this exit door that we had. It was normally not used, but I had to get out of there. So I left out that door, ran around the subway through the parking lot, and then got to my car. When I got inside, I called the cops. I told them what was going on, and then I waited. The man did not seem to leave the subway the entire time. When the cops got there about 5 minutes later, the man was still there. They found him inside and arrested him. He had almost trashed the whole place. It turned out that he was on drugs as well. I don't know what would have happened if I had stayed in the subway. I'm not sure if he would have come after me and tried to attack me or something, but I'm really glad for that exit door that was in the back. Last November, my brother was visiting us from Dundee in the UK with his 3-year-old son. Since my brother had moved away, we didn't get to see him or his family very often, so we cherished it any time we could see them. His wife unfortunately could not travel due to work, and only a day into his visit, he was called back himself for an emergency. His son, my nephew, wanted to stay as we bought him tickets to the football match the day after, so I agreed to take him back to his dad in Dundee after the game. The only train I could get was a late one, and it was therefore the last one of the day. So I took my nephew to the football match and headed straight for the station afterwards. The train was busy, but I had booked us 2 seats for the long train ride. Just as we were about to board the train, the man standing next to me made an odd comment. He said something about packing them in like sardines and how he hates sardines. I found this fairly odd, but I just laughed it off awkwardly. I've never been good at making conversations with strangers, and I always feel uneasy when they approach me. As we made our way to our seats, I noticed an old couple sitting in them. I told them these were our seats, but they were rude and told me that old people shouldn't be made to stand for a journey. I always hate confrontation, especially in public, so I just left. There were no 2 seats together anywhere on the train, so my nephew and I were forced to stand for about an hour until many people in the back finally got off when it stopped in Perth. My nephew and I sat down, and I mistakenly fell asleep as I was so tired after the long day and standing for an hour on the train. As my nephew was only 3 years old, he obviously fell asleep as well. I awoke just as the last passengers were getting off at Dundee. I quickly jumped up and tried to get my nephew off the train as quickly as possible, but he was too slow and I had to stay on the train with him, meaning we missed the stop. As the train was delayed slightly, it was now going straight to Aberdeen, which was about another hour or so away. I sat down and tried my phone to anyone I knew, but I didn't have a signal. I began to panic, as I know there would be no return trains from Aberdeen at this time of night, likely meaning I would have to stay the night there in a hotel. I tried to compose myself and I looked about the train to see if there was anybody who could maybe help me. My carriage had cleared out by this point and there was only 3 other people left. An older woman sleeping a few rows in front of me, a young man reading a book at the opposite side, and a third man behind me. I told my nephew to go back to sleep, and started trying to plan what I would do when we got to Aberdeen. As my phone had no signal, this was obviously going to be difficult, and I thought I should ask the man behind me for any help. I looked in the window's reflection at him, and noticed he was the same man who made the sardine comment earlier. He was a middle-aged man, average build and height, and there was nothing that would suggest he was in any way dangerous. Except one thing, he was staring right at me. I looked away for a minute, thinking maybe he was just looking about the train as I did only a moment ago. But when I looked again, he was still staring. His stare didn't seem to break until he got up to presumably go to the toilet. I debated switching to another carriage, but before I could gather my stuff and wake my nephew, he returned. Only this time, he sat in a different seat, facing me directly. A few uneasy minutes went by before he made his first comment. He said, "Someone's sleepy," and nodded towards my nephew. I laughed awkwardly and put my earphones in to avoid having to talk to him, even though my phone had just died. The sardines man said, "Must be some set of earphones if they can listen to music when your phone's dead." My heart dropped. He continued and said, "I'm only kidding you on," but I now had no excuse to avoid a conversation with him. He asked if I was going home or visiting someone, and I made the mistake of telling him what happened and that I had missed my stop. He responded by saying, "That's quite the situation. You won't get a train back at this time." I nodded and said I would just find a hotel for the night. He then approached my seat and sat across from me. He said, "Hotels will all be booked out, and even if they aren't, they'll charge you a fortune." He continued and said, "I've got a place not too far from the station. You can stay there for the night and get the train in the morning, and don't worry, I'll stay out of the way of you and your son." I explained to the man he was not my son, and that I was happy to spend the money for a hotel. I said this while also trying to stay polite by saying I didn't want to be a nuisance for him, even though I was just not going to stay at a stranger's place. The man responded in an overly friendly tone with, "Oh, believe me, you won't be any nuisance to me." I was now feeling extremely unnerved, but tried my best to talk myself out of the situation. The conversation carried on for another 10 minutes or so, and he was increasingly insistent that I stayed with him. I didn't have any idea what to do. I felt completely helpless. I told him that I needed to use the toilet as an effort to get away from the carriage. That was when he grabbed my wrist below the table. "You're not going anywhere," he said in a hushed tone. "You're staying with me. I'll keep you safe," he said in an extremely chilling voice. I couldn't even bring myself to scream out in that situation. The only other passengers on the carriage were at the opposite end, and I was terrified that if I screamed, the man might hurt me or my nephew. He wouldn't let go of my wrist and repeatedly told me to just act natural. The remaining part of the journey seemed to last a lifetime, and it seemed like there was no light at the end of this tunnel, as this man would not let me go. The train finally reached Aberdeen, and the man told me to wake my nephew without alarming him, and to tell him that we were staying at this nice man's house for the evening. He held my hand as we got off the train, and my worst feelings were coming true, as I knew what would happen when this man got us back to the house. All of a sudden, I was knocked to the floor in a heap of bodies. The police had tackled the man and were arresting him. As I got to my feet, I grabbed my nephew's hand and ran a couple of yards away before completely breaking down. The police comforted me and told me that the young man who was reading his book at the other end of the carriage noticed what was going on. During the train ride, he had sent a text to the British Transport Police, whose number is all over the walls of the train on posters. It took me a couple of minutes to process everything, but I managed to gain enough composure to thank the police and express my gratitude towards the man who sent the text. I only managed to say a few words to him, but I will be forever grateful. He saved me from what would have been a night of terror, and possibly saved me and my nephew's life. The police very kindly took my nephew and I back to Dundee, where my brother and his wife were extremely relieved to see us. It's been some time since that incident now, but I vowed to myself to never fall asleep on the train again, and that I will never miss my stop again. I worked at a store in a mall for about a year. This was a long time ago now, but I will never forget one crazy incident that happened. So I was working by myself to close one night. Usually there would be at least two of us working at once. It was a clothing store that sold some accessories and things like that as well. My coworker had recently quit though, leaving me alone to close. I managed pretty well. I was experienced there by then and knew what to do. There were a couple of times that day when things got busy and the lines were a little bit long, but overall I did well. Soon it became really quiet as we approached the closing time of 7 p.m. In the 6 o'clock hour, not nearly as many people stopped in. By 6:30, it was dead and nobody else was there. So I was at the counter, which was kind of in the exact center of the store. There were clothing racks all around, but then behind me was a wall, and behind that wall was another area where people could shop. My plan was to stay at the counter until close, then lock up, do my finishing tasks, and then clock out and be on my way. However, not long after 6:30, this man entered the store. He had really short hair that was kind of blondish. The man looked fairly young and was wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt. He walked inside the store and looked around, including at me. I was far enough away though where it wasn't a normal thing to greet the customers, so I just stood behind the counter smiling politely. Then the man paced around in the front area of the store for a while and then sat down. There was a little bench area next to the doors just inside. He sat there facing me, just kind of looking in my direction. For the next 20 minutes the man just sat there. I was confused as to what he was doing. Was he waiting for someone? There was nobody else in the store at all other than him and me though. And also nobody else entered the store in the time that he was there. It was getting more and more awkward. Finally, at 6:55, he was still there. It didn't look like he was going to shop, so I decided to walk over to him and let him know that we were closing in 5 minutes. So I left the counter and started to approach the man. When I did, he instantly got up. At first, he started walking towards me. I told him that we were closing in 5 minutes and he would have to be done shopping by then. But the man just zipped right past me, going farther into the store. He didn't even acknowledge anything that I said. He went around to the back part of the store behind the counter. I wanted to make sure that he knew we were closing, so I started to walk over there. When I got to the back though, I witnessed the man push over a full rack of clothes. Then he ran over and pushed over a mannequin, knocking it to the ground. He seemed to be getting violent and I told him that he needed to leave. Of course, he ignored me though. I moved back over to the counter to call security. I heard things being pushed over and messed up behind me as I called. The man continued as I made the call. He eventually ran back to the front of the store. Then he took a bunch of clothes and tossed them up into the air. After that, he ran out of the store and left. I quickly locked up at that point. Security got there a very short time later and I explained what happened. Then I had to stay a whole 45 minutes late, picking up the mess and organizing from what the man did. When I finally left, just about everybody in the mall was gone. I didn't even get word if they caught the guy. I'm guessing not, but I really hope they did. Nevertheless, I never saw him again, and nothing like that happened again either. This happened like 5 years ago when I was on a road trip with my friend at the time, John. I have no plans to ever go on another road trip with that guy again. I don't like driving much, so we made an agreement before where we would take his car and he would drive the entire trip, but I would pay for all the gas. This was a big mistake because John would never stop for food. He only stopped at gas stations and he would only eat candy the entire time. I tried eating all gas station food the first day, but I got tired of it and I wanted something else. I asked John to stop, but he refused and said that he was driving so he could go wherever he wanted. He said if I had a problem with the candy diet, then it's too bad. His dinner for that night was toothpaste candy, which he ended up spilling in the back seat. Anyways, on the second night we'd been driving all day and I was starving. Sometime a little after dark, John stopped for gas and more candy at another gas station. This time though, I saw that there was a Subway not too far away from the gas station within walking distance. I don't really remember where we were. It felt like we were almost in the middle of nowhere. There wasn't much else around aside from the gas station and the Subway. There was just another gas station across the street too, and that was basically it. The Subway was across this other quiet street and sort of down a hill, so it wasn't right next door or anything, but I could see it. After John got gas, which I had to pay for, he went inside to stock up on more toothpaste candy. I decided while he was inside I would walk to the Subway and finally get an actual meal. This Subway was more of an odd-looking one. I know that there's so many Subways around and they're in all types of different buildings. This one was rather small though, and it looked kind of old and outdated. The parking lot was also small, but I figured it would be just fine. A Subway is a Subway. However, when I finally got to the parking lot, I looked inside. About half the lights inside appeared to be off, and it seemed like they might be closed. I'm not sure why, but I tried the door anyways. It opened, and I went inside. But when I got in, I couldn't see anybody around at all. The place was completely empty, and so I figured that they must be closed. After taking a few more steps, I realized that they were in fact closed. And I don't just mean they closed for the night. It looked like the place was not in business at all, because I didn't see any food. As I was standing around inside just looking, I heard somebody coming from the back room area. I didn't know who it would be, so I just turned around to get out of there. I didn't look back, but when I walked out the door, I heard whoever it was go from the back room to behind the counter. When I had made it outside, I looked over through the window, and I saw this guy standing inside behind the counter and looking at me. I couldn't tell much of what he looked like, but I just decided to keep going. I walked back up the hill and across the grass area to get to the gas station parking lot again. As I was doing this, I heard a door open and close a ways back. I looked over and saw a man now walking around the subway. It was the same guy who I had seen. The man was wearing a gray hooded sweatshirt with the hood up, and he was also wearing black sweatpants. I looked away again and made it the rest of the way up to the gas station parking lot. There I looked back and I saw the man was still walking towards me. He was a ways up the hill now. It was perfect timing because John was just walking out of the gas station with a bag filled with candy. I quickly hopped inside of his car, and as soon as John got in, I told him to drive. I looked over and I saw the guy now walking into the gas station parking lot and heading in our direction still. John left, and I saw the guy starting to run in basically the opposite direction now. We drove through that town past the subway sort of to get back to the highway. When we had merged back onto the highway, like maybe 2 or 3 minutes later, a car pulled up behind us. It started tailing us pretty close, which was saying something because John was going at least 10 over. He even moved over to let the car by, but it did not pass us. It just stayed right on our tail. That's when I thought that maybe it was the guy from the subway. We kept driving, and no matter if John changed lanes or slowed down, the car remained right behind us. I couldn't tell who was behind the wheel though because it was too dark out to see. The car kept following us for a good 20 minutes or so. Then finally it stopped. I don't know what prompted it to stop, but it just randomly turned off at an exit. Then we kept going with the trip. Looking back, I'm not sure what was going on there. Was that guy breaking into the subway or up to something sketchy and that's why he followed me? Was he just the subway owner and mad at me because I walked in after close? Maybe the car following us wasn't even that same guy and I'm just paranoid. I really think that it was though, but I'll never know for sure, I guess. That made for a very interesting moment from the road trip though. I work at Walmart, and this is something that took place not too long ago. At Walmart stores, you can shop online, and at our store, there's a bunch of parking spaces dedicated to online orders. When somebody orders online, they can drive to one of the parking spaces, and somebody who works at Walmart will bring out their items and put them in their car for them. This was one of my tasks at Walmart occasionally when this story took place. I would bring out the orders and put them in the people's cars in the parking lot. We had almost an entire row of parking spaces in the lot dedicated to this. Each had a number so we knew which car to bring the orders to. One night I was working and doing this for a while. After a few hours, things started to really quiet down. I didn't have nearly as many orders to bring out. At one point I saw there was just 2 cars parked in those rows. I brought out an order and went back inside and did not get another one for at least 20 more minutes. Then I had to bring one out, which was pretty small, so that was a little strange. I was used to the orders being like 5 or 10 bags of stuff. This one was just one small bag. I didn't really think too much of it though, and was just glad that it would be easier. I got the car and parking space to bring the order to, and then I left the store to bring it out. When I made it out there, I remembered that this was one of the 2 cars that I had seen there during the last order. They must have gotten there really early. It was a dark gray, older looking large SUV. The windows also appeared fairly tinted. I walked out there and headed to the driver's window. I was planning to just hand them the bag. Before I made it there though, I saw the window roll down just a crack. I couldn't see the driver, but I heard a man's voice say, "Put it in the trunk." The window then rolled back up quickly. So I stopped and then walked around to the back side of the vehicle. At that point, I got to the rear hatch and swung it open. As soon as I did, I saw that there were no far back row of seats in the car. Instead, there were these 2 guys wearing all dark clothing and masks covering their heads. One of them came up and quickly grabbed me and started trying to pull me into the car. My instincts took over and I started tugging back, trying to get away. The other guy also started pulling me inside the car without leaving the car. It was 2 against 1, but they did not have great leverage being inside the vehicle and me being out of it. We struggled, and one of the guys put his arm around my head. He covered my mouth so that I couldn't scream or yell for help. It felt like a really long time that the struggle was going on. I really don't know how long exactly it was, maybe a minute. I remember that after what felt like forever, I heard footsteps a ways away. Then I heard a man's voice shouting from behind me. After a few more seconds of struggle, I was let go. In fact, I was pushed back and I fell to the ground about 5 feet behind the vehicle. Then the trunk slammed shut and the SUV quickly screeched away, squealing the tires in the process. When the car was gone, the man's voice who I had heard came up to me. He asked if I was okay and what had just happened. It was an older guy who must have seen what was going on and came over. I told him that the guys had just tried to pull me into the car and I didn't know why. The man said he was calling the police and then went inside the Walmart store with me. I told my manager what happened, and within like 5 minutes the cops were there. I talked to them for a while, but I couldn't give them a license plate or a description of the men because they were wearing masks. After that, I was able to go home. It was a very terrifying experience. I don't do that at Walmart anymore, but I still work there. I don't think those men were ever found. Looking back, it's eerie to think of how I had noticed the car long before the order was made, and the fact that the order was so small. Were they just sitting there planning to kidnap me when they saw me working? I'm also really grateful to the man who saw what was going on, or they might have been able to get me in the vehicle. I went to this really large mall with my friend Macy one time. We were shopping together like we often do. This mall is one of my favorites of all time and was very crowded with lots of other people on the day that we went. I'm not sure how many stores are in this mall, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was like 500. As Macy and I shopped around, we noticed seeing a few of the same people multiple times. You know how it is when you're shopping and you might see a guy walking near you and then you cross paths a while later. Nobody really stood out for one reason or anything though. I mentioned this to you now for context for the rest of the story. So we shopped for several hours, maybe 3 or 4. It was a good solid day of shopping. After that we left and hung out some more at my place. Macy eventually left and went back to her apartment. I was alone in my place late that night when I went on Snapchat. This random woman had added me there. I'm used to being added by random people. It doesn't happen that much anymore, but still here and there. It's usually guys who add me though, and not women. I was curious who she was, so I added her back. When I did, I saw that she had posted a story, and I watched it. There was not just one Snapchat story that she posted though. There was like 10 or 15. I realized that she had been at the mall earlier. In the first picture, she was taking a selfie in front of the large open area in the mall. Upon seeing her, I realized that I remembered noticing her in the mall. I had seen her about maybe twice, but thought nothing of it. She didn't seem to be doing anything weird when I saw her in the mall and was just one of the people that I had seen passing by. But I didn't know her or recognize her other than that at all. The woman had dark hair that was slicked back. She was also wearing dark sunglasses and a tracksuit. She looked almost mysterious. In the selfie that she took, I noticed that Macy and I were in the background. I had no idea that the picture had even been taken. We were not looking at it or anything. I moved on to her next story. It was a picture of a fountain at the mall with the location filter showing the mall she was at. It was not a selfie, but a photo that she took. In the picture, among the people walking by the fountain, I noticed me and Macy again. Now this was really weird. I looked at the next story. This time the woman was posing for a photo, meaning someone else took it for her. It was in the food court, and in the background was me and Macy again. Except you could only see our backs because we were facing away, and I had no clue that the picture had ever been taken. I moved on to the next picture, which was in a random hallway in the mall. The woman was walking directly behind Macy and I. I moved on again to another selfie with us in the background. The more I saw, the more my jaw dropped. I was getting really creeped out. There were a few photos that I did not see us in, but we were in like 10 of them, and I had no clue that any of them had been taken at all. Then I got a Snapchat from Macy. I opened it and she told me that some lady added her on Snapchat and had posted a bunch of pictures of us. She had added Macy as well. I told her that she added me too, and I had also seen the pictures. We then FaceTimed and talked about how crazy it was for like an hour. It made me feel better to know that I wasn't alone in this strange situation. So after talking, we decided to ask the lady what the deal was. I sent her a chat saying that I noticed me and my friend were in the background of a lot of her pictures. I asked her why she did that and why she had added us. I got no response, but was immediately blocked. She blocked Macy too. This was so confusing. We never heard from her again. I'm still left with many questions. Who was this woman? Why did she do that? And how did she know who we were? I mean, how did she find Macy and my Snapchat accounts? How would she even know our names? It was a really strange experience. Last year, I went shopping at a really large mall. It was a weekend, so it was very crowded and tons of other people were there. In some areas, it was hard to even walk through the walkways because it was so crowded. I was there for a few hours and did a decent amount of shopping. However, in the time that I was there, I was pickpocketed. At least, I'm like 90% sure that I was. I would always keep my wallet just inside of my back pocket, which was a terrible habit. Habits are hard to break though, but I obviously don't do that anymore. So anyways, I just know that when I left the mall, I realized that I did not have my wallet anymore, and despite me keeping it in a bad spot, it had never fallen out before when I sat down or anything. After realizing that I didn't have it, I quickly canceled my credit cards. Then I looked everywhere that I could think to look. There was really no use though. Surely somebody would have picked it up. And even if nobody did, it would be like finding a needle in a haystack. I was disappointed, but luckily I didn't have much cash in the wallet and nobody had used my cards yet. I thought that I would never get it back, and so when I was home, I started ordering new credit cards. I also looked into getting a new driver's license. I was pretty disappointed, but what could I do about it now? However, late that night, I got a text from a random number I did not recognize. The text said, "Meet me tomorrow night at 11 p.m. and bring $100 cash to get wallet back." It also had an address which turned out to be a park near the city a ways away. I texted back asking who this was and where they had got my wallet. They didn't respond though. I wasn't sure what I should do. Had they stolen my wallet or found it? I was pretty sure that they had stolen it. I considered getting the police involved, but I figured that I couldn't prove that this person stole it and not just found it. The fact that they wanted me to bring $100 really made me mad though. After thinking about it, I decided that I would go and meet with them at the park. But I told my friend Marty about it, and he agreed to go with me to get my wallet at the park. I didn't know what to expect, but being asked to meet at 11 o'clock at night in a park sure seemed sketchy. I really wanted to get my wallet back though. So the next night we drove to the park and got there at around 11. I had never been to that park before. It was a parking lot off a quiet road surrounded by woods. Then there were a few trails, but it was super dark out now. When I arrived, nobody else was in the parking lot. Marty and I sat in the car waiting. At 11 p.m. sharp, I got another text from the number. It said, "Exit your vehicle and take the left path for a quarter mile." This seemed even more sketchy to me. For some reason though, I got out of the car. I just really wanted my wallet back. I had the $100 cash and Marty stayed in the car. So I began walking down the path to the left. It was literally pitch dark and I could barely see anything. I made it about 100 yards down the trail when I felt my phone vibrating. It was not another text from the number though, but it was a call from Marty. I picked it up. I heard Marty telling me to get back to the car now. Then I heard off in the distance tons of honking coming from a car horn. I also heard a car driving. I turned around and ran back to the parking lot. By the time I got there, I just barely saw an SUV driving off down the quiet road. I saw Marty in the car waving me over, still parked in the same spot. I quickly went back inside the car. Marty explained to me what had happened. He said that when I was a ways down the path, this SUV pulled into the parking lot. He saw at least 3 guys in it, and he claimed that he was sure he saw one of them brandishing a gun. They pulled up and parked a few spaces away. Marty figured that I was in trouble to get jumped, or maybe worse, so he started honking the car horn like crazy. This actually scared them off. I figured they thought Marty was me, and seeing how he was still in the car and making a bunch of noise, they wouldn't be able to rob him. If Marty had not been there, these guys would have ambushed me alone on the dark trail. Now, I know a lot of people will say that I'm stupid. Why would anybody meet a random person alone in a park at 11 p.m. on a random trail in the woods? And you're right, it was stupid, and I deserve all the crap that I get for it. But I was much younger, and I've certainly learned from the experience. At least I had the thought to bring a friend, which ended up saving me. Hopefully this can teach anybody listening to always be prepared in any situation. This happened a long time ago, back around the year 2000. I was 12 years old and I lived at home with just my mom and my older sister. At the time, my sister, who was 16, had gone to a friend's house for the night. My mom was gone working late, which she occasionally did, and I never really knew exactly when she would be home from work. It was a Friday night, and after getting home from school and doing my homework, I was getting hungry. By the time it was around 6:30, I decided to call my mom to try to find out when she would be home. If not, maybe she would let me order a pizza or something. Back then, I did not have a cell phone, but my mom did. Obviously, it was not a smartphone, and I had to dial the whole number from the home phone every time I were to call. So I remember that I dialed and then waited for my mom to pick up the phone. However, nobody answered. There was this robotic message that said, "This call has been sent to voicemail." I was sort of confused, but then I decided to leave my mom a message. I told her that my sister had left and I was home by myself, and I was wondering when she would be back or if I should order something. Then I hung up the phone. About 5 minutes later, the phone rang. I picked it up figuring that it was my mom, and sure enough, it was. She told me that she was still stuck at work and said that my sister could take me somewhere to get food if I wanted. I told her that she was gone, and I asked if she had gotten my message. My mom said no, she hadn't got a message. I figured maybe her cell phone was broken, or maybe the answering machine with it was broken. Back then, technology wasn't quite what it is today. So we talked briefly, and my mom said that she would be home in maybe an hour or so. Then we hung up, and I decided that I would wait for her. So I was in the living room about 10 minutes later, and the telephone rang again. I thought that it was either my mom again or maybe my sister, so I picked it up. When I did, it was neither, but a man's voice on the other end. I did not recognize his voice, but he said hello. When I asked who was calling, the man said that I had left him a message earlier. I was confused and said no, I didn't. He said that I had and asked why I called him and started asking who I was and stuff. I said that it must be a mistake, and I remember that he said he was not mad at me. I was kind of getting creeped out by the guy, so I just hung up the phone. It was a short time later, though, that I realized that I must have called him after all. When I had tried to call my mom the first time, I must have called him by mistake. He must have been who I left the message for. It was weird, but I also thought that when the guy called me, he was acting kind of strange. I just hoped that he wouldn't call again, and he didn't. However, probably 30 minutes later, and my mom still wasn't home yet. I was in the living room when out of nowhere there was a knock at our front door. I got up and went to a window to look outside before answering. I saw this random man standing there. He was a little bit bigger of a guy and looked fairly young for an adult and had sort of large glasses. Because I didn't know who he was, I was not going to answer the door. The man knocked again and I still did nothing. Then I remembered that he did something that really surprised me. He tried opening the front door. Thank God it was locked. Now I was really creeped out, and I was about to run to the phone and call the police, but the man stepped away from the door. He started to walk around the house, but then backed off. He walked back over to his car while looking around at both our house and the neighbors. After going down the driveway, he got into his car, which was parked out in the street. Then he drove away. I called my mom after that and told her about the guy. She was thankfully on her way home. When she got back, the man was long gone. He did not return. Since then, I feel like the man who tried to enter our house was the guy that I accidentally called. I don't know how he would have got our address though, but I think it's too crazy to be a coincidence. I used to work at Walmart many years ago. This was about 10 years back now, and I was much younger at the time. It was one of my first jobs, and overall it was okay. What I mostly did in my time at Walmart was to push the carts in the parking lot. This job might seem easy, but it actually got pretty tough sometimes. For one, I lived in a climate that got pretty cold, and I would be outside in the winter. But also, so many people shopped at the Walmart and used the carts that it was hard to otherwise keep up. The other workers that would push carts would always call in, and I would be stuck all by myself in the whole parking lot. At my Walmart, there was also some crazy drivers, which made pushing a bunch of carts in at once a challenge. Still, I feel like I did a pretty good job most of the time. One of the other problems that we had sometimes though was that people would not put the carts back where they belong. There were a good number of cart returns. Sometimes they would fill up and overflow, and other times people would just not put the carts back and leave them scattered around the parking lot. And even occasionally sometimes people would steal the carts. So one night I was out in the parking lot working. The weather was nice, so that was good. I was working until like 10 p.m. or something like that. At around 9 o'clock, things were pretty quiet. There were not as many customers at the store anymore, and I had just gotten the carts full again. So now I had a little more time and I was going around the parking lot and getting the stray carts. I collected several from one side of the lot and then went to the other. When I was at the east side of the lot, which was generally the quieter side, I saw a man pushing a cart. However, the cart that the man was pushing was empty, and he was at the far back corner of the parking lot starting to go off the property. I was wondering if he was going to steal the cart. He didn't look homeless at all or anything, and again, nothing was in the cart, so I wasn't sure what he was doing. I started to walk over towards the man. He kept going and was soon off of our property. He went into a parking lot that was next to ours for some other business that was closed by now. In that parking lot, it was almost completely empty, but there were a few cars scattered around. There was also a U-Haul type truck that was parked there. The man kept going towards the truck. When I had finally caught up to him, I called out to the man. I asked him what he was doing with the cart. The man completely ignored me and kept going. When he made it to the truck, another man got out from the driver's seat of it. He met the other guy, and then right in front of me, as if I wasn't even there, they went around and opened the back of the truck. I asked what was going on, and the men glanced over at me, but I was once again ignored. Then they lifted the cart into the truck, which I could see had some other junk in it. After that, I yelled at them to stop and said that they couldn't do that. The men looked over, but still ignored me. I was angry now and felt disrespected. I started walking over to them, and they shut the door to the back of the truck, and then started walking to the front of it. I got in their way, and they kind of shoved me. When this happened, I thought about trying to fight them, but I thought better of it. I went back to the other end of the truck, and then tried to open the back door to get the cart, but it was locked. Then they started to reverse the truck, nearly hitting me, and I just barely got out of the way on time. They quickly drove off and were gone. It was very weird. I didn't know what on earth had just happened. I went back to the Walmart and just kept getting carts after that. When my shift was over, I reported the stolen cart to my boss, who said, "Yeah, you win some, you lose some. Tonight you lost." Something about the guys who stole the carts though seemed really strange. How did they just completely ignore me? And why did they even want to steal a shopping cart in the first place? For the most part though, I decided to forget it. I kept on working at Walmart. A few nights later though, I was working again. It became another quiet night similar to the one before. I was walking around the parking lot and collecting carts towards the end of my shift again. Then I saw that same type of U-Haul truck. Of course, I didn't know for sure if this was the same one as before or not. There are probably many trucks that look just like that around. Still, I was curious. The truck was parked in the far back corner of the parking lot at the end row pretty much by itself. As I walked over there, I decided that I would go and see. I got closer and closer and then approached the truck. I was heading for the passenger side front window. As soon as I got within maybe 5 feet, I could see the same two guys were inside. The truck suddenly took off, very quickly driving away. It was the same truck with the same guys. But what were they doing just sitting there? Were they planning to steal another shopping cart? I'm not sure. After that, I didn't see those guys again. So maybe they went to a different Walmart to steal carts from. I'm not sure, but it was pretty strange. I went shopping at the mall with my sister a couple of years ago. We do lots of stuff together, and she's just a few years older than I am. We went to this really huge mall that's about 15 minutes from the city we live in. We went inside and shopped for hours. I think we went to like 20 different stores and spent more money than I would like to admit. But when we were finally done, it was a day well spent. When we left the mall, it was probably like 5 or 6 p.m. Things were quieter around there now. We parked, I think, on the second level of the parking garage, or maybe the third, but we were parked next to the wall in the back row. After putting our many shopping bags in the car, we both got in the front. My sister was driving, and I was in the front passenger seat. Before leaving, though, my sister got a FaceTime from one of our friends. It was a girl who was good friends with the both of us, and we started talking to her before leaving. During this conversation, maybe 5 minutes into it, out of nowhere we saw somebody walk right up to the front driver's door of the car. I thought that it was whoever had drove the car that was parked next to us, but it wasn't. It was a man, and he instantly turned and started knocking on my sister's window. My sister quickly ended the phone call and looked up at the man. She rolled down the window just a crack. I was curious to know what the man wanted as well, but also suspicious. He asked for a ride and said that he really needed to get someplace. Obviously, it would be a bad idea to give a ride to a random stranger. My sister said no, we couldn't do it. After saying no, the man instantly walked back, and I thought he was walking away, but he stopped at the rear driver's side door and then tried opening it. The door was locked though, and he couldn't get in. Then the man came back and started banging on my sister's window. She yelled at him to go away. He did not. He just continued to bang on the window, and I was afraid that it might break. So then my sister put the car into reverse and started backing up. She was able to get out of the space and then started to drive away. The man chased after us though. With it being a parking garage, my sister could not go very fast. We had to go back around to where the ramp went down. The man was able to catch up with us pretty easy. Then he ran alongside the car and jumped onto the hood of the car and blocked the windshield. It was one of the craziest things I had ever seen. In this moment, my sister then stopped the car. The man started yelling and then banging on the windshield. We happened to be passing by one of the walkways that led into the mall. When I looked over, I noticed a man walking on the walkway and starting to enter the parking lot area. This man then started yelling at the guy on the hood of our car. He told him to get down and asked what he was doing. The man got off the hood of my sister's car and then started charging at the other guy. We watched him attempt to attack the guy. However, this man entering the parking lot was a big guy. He looked strong, like maybe he was a weightlifter or possibly he had been in the military, because when the crazy man approached him, the guy easily took him to the ground. He was yelling at the guy, and the other man struggled to attack him. The strong man yelled at us to call 911 as he had the man in some kind of a wrestling pin or something. We did as he asked and continued to sit there. Within a minute or two, somebody else left the mall to go into the parking lot. They instantly saw what was happening though and turned around and left. The crazy guy was yelling and cursing, and the strong guy was telling him to shut up. My sister and I were not really sure what to do, so we just stayed there in the car. Thankfully, within about 5 minutes, the cops got there. I think there are some that always patrol around the mall. They were able to detain the crazy guy and talk to all of us involved. There was also security camera footage in the garage which would verify the whole incident. After talking with officers, we went home. That was my craziest trip to the mall ever. My friend and I had a conjoined birthday party at a water park because our birthdays were so close and we had most of the same friends. The water park was a well-known place, so there was a lot of people there. It was going to be a 2-day weekend thing, with everyone staying in the hotel rooms that the water park resort offered. When we got there, everything was normal. We put our bathing suits on right away and headed down to the water park. We went down a few slides together, and then we were making our way down to the lazy river, and this man came up to us. He asked us if we had seen a girl with a pink bathing suit that looked to be around 6. We said no and left it alone, but me on the other hand freaked out that he lost his kid, so I kept thinking about it. We went to the lazy river and went around a few times, and just before we started getting bored, we decided to go to the hot tub. When we got to the hot tub, the same man that lost his kid was there also, still with no kid. We got in, and the guy was sitting on the complete other side of us. But then I noticed that he started coming closer to us, and eventually sat down next to us. He whispered to us, "Hey, do you want some weed or booze? I can get it for you." None of us really responded other than saying the quiet refusals. I motioned to the rest of my friends that we needed to get out of the hot tub because the guy was being creepy. As we got up and left, he tried to get one of my friends to stay by grabbing her leg. We immediately went to tell the lifeguard, but the lifeguard didn't seem to care, so we ran to tell our parents, and one of my friends turned around and saw him following us. We told our parents, and they called the police because the security at the water park was horrible, and they said that he wouldn't even have to be removed from the park. Us girls tried to go back to our room, but the man still followed us, so our parents flipped the script on him and stood watching him and followed him around everywhere. Us girls were not there anymore at that point, but our parents followed the creep back to his room, and soon after, the police showed up. Hours later, we found out that his daughter was in the room the whole time and he had drugged her and she was unconscious, so the ambulance showed up and took her away from him. He was arrested and lost custody of her. I don't know much about the whole story other than that, but he ended up on the news and we got a refund. The water park really didn't do much, and I'm glad that the police were called. Otherwise, his daughter may have been in way worse shape. Every summer, I go camping in Yosemite National Park with my cousins, and every trip we spend a night stargazing. There's a village with markets and restaurants down the road from the campsites. Across the road from the village is a large field of tall grass with a winding narrow boardwalk that leads deep into the field. Imagine a boardwalk dock that reaches out into a bay, but instead of open water, it's a field surrounded by towering trees. This spot is where we usually sit to watch the stars. This night of stargazing was uneventful as the sky was cloudy that night and we weren't able to see the stars at all, so we just sat there and talked for a bit. One of my cousins noticed a light deep within the woods that was still and bright. He pointed it out because he thought it was odd how there was a light in that direction to begin with, as that area of the woods has no buildings or campsites, which meant that there shouldn't be people in that area, and it was very late by this time. We moved closer towards that area of the woods along the boardwalk, and were able to see that the light was twinkling. It looked as though the light came from a flame. It's strict in the rules of any wooded national park that you shouldn't light flames in areas that don't have a designated fire pit. My cousin was certain that where the light was coming from was empty and open woods, and was well out of distance from any campsites, roads, and housing. The flame must have been very deep into the woods, because no matter how close we got on the boardwalk, the light wasn't becoming any more clear to make out. We stopped when we heard commotion, as though a large group of people were there. We assumed that there must have been a party going on until we heard chanting. It started as loud party sounds, but slowly turned into synchronized whooping and then howling. Not like a wolf howl, but more like harmonized groans and wailing. The voices became more guttural and seemed as though the people making the noises were almost in pain or misery. The sounds we heard were no longer ignorable, and it was obvious something odd was happening in those woods. Before I knew it, I was the only one closest to the end of the boardwalk, because when I turned around, I saw that all my cousins had retreated and huddled far behind me, staring with me into the trees. The faint sounds of wailing were enough to know that whatever was going on around that night was not a party. The next night, my cousins and I ventured into the woods in the general direction where we saw the light, and sure enough, it was empty woods in every direction for an acre or two. No signs of camps or cabins. The only evidence of any people being there was a large patch of dirt and pine needles where we found masses of bare footprints in the mud and soil. I think we experienced a cult that night, which is still strange to me that they even exist. I wonder to this day what type of cult they were, and deep down wish we had investigated more that night and gotten closer, even though that would have been scary. There was an old, nearly abandoned mall not too far from where I lived. This was a few years ago now, and I don't live there anymore, but I had lived in the area for a while at the time and passed by it several times. I didn't know if it was open or not, but one night, for whatever reason, I got curious and decided to check it out. I'm not a guy who loves to explore abandoned buildings or anything like that, but I've always found malls interesting, and I've been fascinated with retail businesses and their history and whatnot. Going into old and outdated stores and malls always feels kind of interesting, like you're going back in time or something. So I went to this mall and I parked in the nearly empty parking lot. There were just a couple of cars scattered around, maybe 5. I couldn't tell if they were maybe mall employees, customers, or just random cars of people who weren't even on the property. I got out and then walked to the doors. From the outside, the mall looked like it hadn't been touched since the late 1990s. I walked up to the doors, half expecting them to be locked. The first door was, but to my surprise, the second one opened. I looked around and saw that it was mostly dark inside. I started walking down the hallway and there were no open stores. All the spaces for stores were either empty or completely covered up. But that was just one of the hallways, so I kept walking. I got farther in and things had been completely silent. That's when I started hearing noises. At first, I heard what sounded like something falling over a ways away ahead of me and out of my sight. I couldn't tell where exactly it was coming from, if it was inside of a store or in a hallway or what. I walked into another hallway with more abandoned stores. It was kind of interesting to see despite the noises because it looked like it hadn't been touched in many years. There, I heard the sound of what sounded like whistling. It was really quiet, and whoever was whistling was not whistling any tune in particular. I was getting creeped out. As I kept walking, I heard another set of footsteps but far away. It was probably the same person, but I didn't know for sure. After being in the mall for maybe 5 minutes and exploring a couple of hallways, I decided that maybe I should leave. This was a little bit too creepy for me. I figured that I was probably not even supposed to be there in the first place. I mean, I hadn't seen an open store at all. I turned around and then heard the footsteps again. Somebody else was definitely in there with me and not that far away. I walked back down the hallways I had come through. Then I made it back to the main doors. But when I got there, they were blocked off. I tried it anyways, but it wouldn't open. It was like somebody had locked it. Meanwhile, I heard the footsteps off in the distance. I turned around and quickly walked to another hallway to try to find another exit. As I was doing this, it was like the footsteps got louder and louder. Not closer, but just louder, as if the person was stomping or something now. I started jogging down the hallways. There was no exit in the one that I was in now, so I turned and found another hallway. As I jogged, I heard the footsteps still off in the distance. Finally, I went down another hallway and saw some doors. I sprinted to them, hoping that these would open, unlike the others. When I made it there, I tried the door, and thankfully, it actually opened. I left and then sprinted out into the parking lot and around the building. I found my car back where I had parked it, and did not stop running until I had made it back to the car and went inside. Then I drove straight home. Not that long ago, the mall got demolished, and they're building strip malls on the property now. I don't know what was going on there that night. Why did the doors get locked behind me? Who else was in there with me? I may never know. This happened 13 years ago on my 10th birthday. At the time, I shared a bedroom with my older sister, who was 16 at the time. Our room had 2 full-size metal frame beds, and we had lost the covering on the bottom of the legs. I was excited to have a big birthday party, so I woke up early to inflate all my balloons, and I scattered them all over our bedroom floor. The day became cold and rainy though, so my parents decided to cancel my birthday party. 10-year-old me was so angry. My parents suggested having a nice dinner at home and watching movies. I have always been the slowest eater in the family, so while I finished my dinner, they began the movie. My sister got into an argument with my mom and stormed off to the bathroom upstairs. I can't recall what it was about since I was enjoying my food. All I heard was my mom yelling at my sister in Spanish, saying a phrase that basically means the devil is going to see you because of how you are behaving. When I finished, I decided it was time to sleep since I was still mad that my parents canceled my party. I went to my room and got comfy in my bed, while my sister wasn't in the room yet as she was still in the bathroom. As I drifted off to sleep, I heard a balloon pop. It woke me up, but I didn't place much thought into it. Then I heard pop, 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 pop. All my balloons were popping. My bed began to shift slowly forward and then really hard back to the wall. I was screaming my head off, calling for my mom. I was too scared to jump off and run to the door. I screamed for what seemed like forever until finally my mom ran into the room and turned on the lights. I could see all the balloons that were popped were only around my bed. I told her exactly what happened, and she told me to sleep in her room. The next morning, my sister ran into my parents' room and woke me up yelling at me. She was yelling and asked why I would leave her alone in our room after she told me that she was scared. I yelled back at her that I told her I slept the whole night with Mom and Dad. My mom confirmed to her that she took me out of the room and my sister was not there. My sister's face got white, and then she told us what happened to her. After she got out of the bathroom, she went into our room, and she got in bed and fell asleep. She woke up at 3:30 a.m. and couldn't move. She could hear footsteps heading to our room door. The door opened, and there was a big, tall shadow of what seemed like a man. It seemed to be our dad, and he had the habit of checking on us at night, but the strange thing was he wouldn't do it that late at night, and the shadow never flicked on the light. It just stood there. She began to hear a weird noise, like a bull getting ready to charge from my window, and getting closer and closer to her ear until she could feel warm breath on her ear. She began to recite a prayer in her head until she could finally move. She mustered up the courage to jump off the bed and flick on the light, which was next to the doorway and the figure. When the light came on, the figure was gone, and she couldn't hear the noise anymore. She looked at my bed, and there was something that appeared to be me. She described it as looking exactly like me with a ponytail. My sister told the thing, which she thought was me, that she had just experienced something and that she was scared and that she wanted to go to my parents' room. The thing told her, "Don't worry, just go back to sleep." And after my sister questioned it, asking if I was sure, it said, "Just go back to bed." My sister was surprised since I scare easily, but then went back to her bed. She couldn't take it and woke up at 5 a.m. to go to my parents' room. She looked at my bed and got furious because I seemed to be gone. That's when she ran into my parents' room to wake me up. We exchanged stories and we all went back to the room. You can still see the markings on the wood floor from my bed being dragged. That night scared my sister and I for months, and it was the most memorable birthday I had as a kid. When my daughter was 2 years old, I was having a tough time as a single mother and decided to take a road trip to the California coast. I made reservations at a cool cabin in the woods within walking distance of the beach. Before I left, my stepfather gave me a loaded .38 revolver which I stored under the driver's seat. Sometime after driving through San Francisco, it was very late and dark, and nobody was on the highway. My daughter was sleeping peacefully in her car seat next to me. Back then, we could legally have car seats in the front. I noticed a car coming up behind me, and it passed me, but then slowed down and was driving alongside of me. I sped up and slowed down, but I could not shake him. I looked over, and this guy had his interior light on, and he was furiously gesturing me to pull over. I knew that I had to find a safe place, and there was nobody else on the road, and I was also running low on gas. There was just nothing on the highway for miles, though. I kept driving, and the guy would not leave me alone. I was getting very frightened, but the mama bear in me was coming out, and I was also getting very angry as well. I knew that he could see my kid in the car, who was still sleeping. Finally, there was an exit up ahead at a gas station in the middle of nowhere, so I took the exit with the guy closely following me. I wasn't sure what to do. The gas station was brightly lit but had no customers. I didn't feel that it was safe to pull in, so I slowly passed it and drove further into the dark, deserted landscape. I then pulled into a large dirt area and drove quite a ways off the highway with him following me. I knew I was in big trouble, and I needed to take control and wanted to put him in a vulnerable situation. I was really angry. I stopped the car, grabbed the gun, and jumped out, locking the car behind me. As he pulled up, I ran around to the passenger side and waited. He then got out of his car and quickly moved towards me, and I suddenly held the gun up, visible in the moonlight. He came to a halt, surprised, and then I leveled the gun across the car, took aim, and waited. He stood there, weighed his options, and then turned around, got back into his car, and left. Not a word was spoken between the two of us. It totally freaked me out and put me on edge for the rest of the trip, but thankfully nothing else like that happened, and it was fine. I live in an apartment building currently that's right across the street from a Walmart. To paint the picture, my apartment building has 5 levels and I'm on the top floor. My apartment is in the back side of the building, and my windows overlook a small grassy area. Next to that is a sidewalk and then the street. Right across the street is the Walmart. The Walmart does not face my apartment, so I kind of see it from the side. However, I can still see a good amount of the parking lot. It's kind of interesting to look out of my window most of the time, because being that high up, you can see all the things going on down below, such as people walking on the sidewalk, cars driving by, and people coming and going from the Walmart store. Sometimes I like to people watch when things are busy. One night I was at home and happened to glance out of the window. It was pretty late, about 10-something p.m. By now the sidewalks were empty and the roads were pretty quiet too. Only the occasional car would pass by. The Walmart parking lot still had a lot of vehicles in it, but much less than earlier. The store would be closing soon, so most of the vehicles belonged to the employees. I didn't see any people walking in the parking lot, but I kept watching outside. It was kind of relaxing to just stand there and look out of the window. About a minute went by, and then I saw a man walk out of the Walmart building. He turned to the left, and then he started walking towards the sidewalk by the Walmart, which was closer to me. I kept watching him, not really giving it much thought. The man then walked off that sidewalk and started walking across the street right in the middle of it. He was not going on a crosswalk or anything like that, but there were no cars around, so it was fine. But as he was walking in the middle of the road, he looked up and seemed to notice me. Even though I was pretty far away, I guess that I was more noticeable now. I mean, my apartment lights were on, and I was just standing there in the giant window staring out. A lot of the other apartment lights were probably off, which made mine more noticeable. The man continued to look at me as he walked across the street. I figured that he would get to the sidewalk and then walk down it, but no. As he made it across, he then started pointing at me, and he was not smiling or anything like that. I was far away, but if anything, he appeared angry. For some reason, I didn't move away from the window though. I kept watching him. The man walked right through the grass area towards the apartment building. I didn't think that he lived here, but I guess it was possible. There was a back door near the grassy area. Some people would use it to go out and smoke in the grassy area sometimes. I watched the man walk to the back door, all while still looking at me and pointing. Then he tried to open the door, but it was locked. He just started standing around by it and looking up at me the whole time. I realized that he didn't live there, or else he would have had a key and been able to enter, but I also didn't know what he was doing. I was too curious. I was not waving at him or anything. Why did this guy care so much that I was watching him? Looking back, I probably should have just walked away. I really don't know why I didn't, but I found it so off how the man was just staring at me and pointing at me, now clearly looking angry. After a while, I tried to smile and wave at the guy to be nice. He didn't react well and kept doing what he was doing. This was really weird. Then I saw the back door open. Some guy left to go smoke a cigarette. Just then, I saw the man quickly head to the door and then make it inside before it shut. When that happened, my heart sank. He was now inside of the building. I turned off all my lights then and moved away from the window. Probably 5 minutes later, I heard somebody try opening my apartment door. I knew who it was. He violently tried the doorknob like 5 times before banging on the door. I didn't answer it. I didn't even bother to go close to the door. I was really creeped out now. The man loudly banged on the door a few more times. I was in the other room, hoping that he would leave. The guy waited maybe 30 seconds and then banged again. Finally, I heard footsteps walking away. Only then did I go over to the front door and look out of it. The man was finally gone. After that, I got ready for bed and went to sleep. I haven't seen that man since. I don't know what his problem was or why he was so determined to get to me, but I'm really glad that he didn't. This happened last year. I went to a really large mall with my friend Hannah, and we live not too far away from it. We go shopping there together occasionally. The mall has pretty much every store you could want and is very nice. On this particular time, it was a Saturday, so the mall was very busy. There were tons of other people shopping. At one point, we were in this really open area. From far away, I saw this guy was just standing there and he appeared to be staring at me. I continued to look at him, wondering if he was actually staring at me or somebody else who was nearby. The guy was large, had dark hair but was almost bald, and also had a slight beard. He continued to look at me and started pointing and waving. I looked around and was sure now that he was looking at me and not somebody else. I'm sure that I also had a very confused look on my face. I pointed him out to Hannah, who agreed that he seemed to be looking at me. I wasn't creeped out at the time, but more so amused, because he was really far away and there were lots of other people around. The man continued to stand there and point at me for a minute or so. Then he started walking over to us rather quickly. We easily walked away and blended in with the crowd and were able to escape the man. Hannah and I talked about him for a minute or two, wondering what he was doing. Maybe he thought we were someone else. I really didn't know. We just kept shopping after that though. About an hour later, I saw the man again. This time, we were in a mall walkway. The man was coming up from the opposite side and approaching us. He looked at me almost right after I spotted him. He turned and then started walking towards us again. We were much closer to him this time, but still able to get away. Very quickly, we went left, and then we went down an escalator to a lower level and then into a nearby store before the man knew where we had gone. Then we continued once again with our shopping. I was really hoping that that was the last we would see of the man, and for a long time, it was. For the next 2 or 3 hours that Hannah and I were at the mall, we did not encounter that creepy guy. I figured that we had lost him and he left, and I pretty much forgot about him after that. When Hannah and I were finally done shopping that afternoon, we left the mall. As we were walking outside though, I remember I heard some footsteps behind us. They were going kind of fast, so I turned around. That same creepy guy from the mall was there. He looked at us and had a grin on his face that looked anything but friendly. As he walked towards us, I asked him who he was. The man then said, "You girls looking for a ride? I can drive you home." I said no. We were walking to Hannah's car in the parking lot, which was just around the corner. The man started walking even closer to us. He got like right behind us within inches, and then said to us, "You guys are going to come with me." I didn't even think at all, I just started running. Hannah followed right after, and we both sprinted away from the man. He briefly gave chase, but was not very quick. We ran to Hannah's car, got inside, and left. Then we reported the guy. I haven't seen him since. We've been to the mall a few times since that incident, and obviously we haven't seen him. There's so many people there typically, and I'm not sure if he wanted to kidnap us or what, but I'm glad that we got away from him. This is something that happened back in the 1990s when I was in high school. I used to hang out with my friends at our local mall all the time. The mall was very popular back then. One time, I remember that we were going to this one new store that had just opened. It was some kind of clothing store that was having a big grand opening. I was with my friend Shauna at the time, and we were waiting in line to get into the store. The store was already open, but they would only let a certain amount of people in at a time because there were so many people there. So as we stood in line for a while, I told Shauna that I was going to get a pretzel and would be right back. She would keep our place in line, and I recall that it seemed like it was going to be at least a 10-minute wait before we got into the store. I could see the pretzel shop just down the way, so I walked over there and got one. I was gone from Shauna for maybe 2 or 3 minutes, I would say. Then I walked back over to her. When I arrived back, she told me that some guy had been following me. I had no idea. I asked her what she was talking about, and she pointed to a guy that was now sitting on a bench not too far away. She said that she saw me go to get the pretzel and the man got in line behind me. But after I left, he left without ordering. She said that she could see him just staring at me and then following. When I got back in line with Shauna though, obviously he couldn't, and he went and sat down on the bench. As she was telling me this, I saw the man look up at us and then quickly look back down away. I didn't know how I could have been so oblivious that I hadn't noticed him. We stayed in line and kind of kept an eye on the man as we waited. I was hoping he would walk away, but he didn't. He just kept sitting there, and here and there he would lock eyes with me for a second. The man had sort of stringy hair, like it was long and greasy, but he was also balding a little. He also had a goatee. After a while, we were finally led into the store. We made our way in and shopped. We were inside for probably like 15 minutes, and I remember that we each got some stuff. As we were inside the store shopping, I forgot all about the man. Eventually, we left. When we did though, I saw the man still sitting there on the bench in the same spot, and I remembered him. And now we started to walk away, and when we started to walk away, I noticed the man getting up. Shauna and I walked to the right, and we saw that the man was starting to walk after us. This is where our instincts really kicked in. We both just started running. We sprinted through the mall, with some people probably thinking that we were crazy. But the man did not sprint after us. I think he realized how crazy suspicious that would look. We ran and ran until we got to the exits. Then we left and drove home. We never saw that man again after that. I'm really glad that we didn't, because we hung out at the mall many more times. Maybe the man had seen us before, or maybe that was his only time at that mall. I'm really not sure, but I'm glad that we did not stick around to see what he wanted. When I was 19, I was living with my mom, her boyfriend, and my boyfriend in a desert town that neighbors Joshua Tree National Park. We lived in a small house on a dirt road right on the edge of the national park. Our backyard and beyond was all protected land. All the roads in the area were paved, but for some reason, ours wasn't. There was also no streetlights on our street, which made for great stargazing but very limited viewing capabilities at night. This happened in February, and it gets cold at night in the winter, and we even get a good snow every so often. It all started with noises outside my bedroom window late at night. I even heard a cell phone go off once. My boyfriend even said that he thought he saw somebody running away from my house once when he looked out the window to investigate. This went on and off for a week or so and seemed creepy, but so far harmless. Aside from the phone, which only I heard, it was blamed on the wind or animals in the bushes. Then one night, my boyfriend and I were on the back porch having a smoke. Suddenly, a small rock came hurtling off out of the dark, empty desert across from us. We looked at each other puzzled and startled, and then got up and went towards the door. Just as he opened it, a bigger rock the size of a golf ball came out of nowhere and hit him in the head. It bounced off of him and then hit me. We were both shaken and immediately told my mom and her boyfriend. As we were telling them, more rocks were being thrown, hitting the house, windows, and rolling off the roof. They soon after ceased, and though shaken up, we moved on with the evening. The next night around 10 p.m., the rocks started up again. We were all in a panic, and the guys decided to go out and look for whoever was doing this and teach them a lesson. So they went out into the desert with my big German Shepherd wolf mix to investigate. My mom's boyfriend was really into martial arts, so they had various weapons with them just in case. They had been out in the desert for about 30 minutes so far, and I was inside playing a video game. Suddenly, I heard a crash at the front door, followed by a yelp. I jumped up to see what was going on, and under the door, I saw my dog's foot sticking out on my side of the door, which was closed. My dog had run into the door with so much force that his foot went underneath it. I quickly opened it, and that giant fearless dog had peed himself. Tail tucked between his legs, he hauled it back inside the house and hid. Now, I've seen that dog chase off packs of wild dogs and coyotes. He wasn't afraid of anything. Whatever he saw in the desert that night, I'll never and probably don't ever want to know. I had never seen him like that before or ever again after that night. The guys came back shortly after with nothing to report. Right after they came back inside, the rocks started up again. This time we called the cops, but when they showed up, they said it was probably just some drunk person messing around with us and left it at that. A couple of nights after that, the guys would go hunting outside for whatever it was and never found a trace of anything. The rocks continued on and off for 2 or 3 more nights, whenever somebody wasn't searching outside. Then, one night, the guys decided to get a jug of wine and just sit outside on the front porch with all the weapons and just wait. They started yelling threats out into the dark desert, which got worse and more twisted as the wine began to flow. The threats were dark and disturbing as the night wore on, and had there been someone out there hiding, I imagine they were probably a little scared at this point. My mom called from work and wanted to talk to her boyfriend, so we went inside to take the call. Just as he answered the phone, I heard my boyfriend yell from outside, and I heard him running away into the desert. He came back a few minutes later with cactus prongs protruding from his leg. He said that he chased someone wearing all black through the desert until he drunkenly fell into a cactus bush. After that night, the rocks stopped. I'll never know who or what was hiding out there or why they did what they did. Who would hide out in the desert at night in the middle of the winter throwing rocks for hours on multiple different nights? It was such an elaborate prank if that's what it was for no reason. I still don't feel safe in the desert at night over 10 years later. This story takes place back in the 2000s. I was a little girl celebrating my friend's birthday. She always had a Halloween party to celebrate because that's when her birthday happened to be. She always talked about how her basement felt weird and she didn't like staying down there alone. Well, having 10 or so 10-year-old girls sleep over on Halloween night isn't exactly bedroom material, so her mom and grandma set us up in the basement. There we played a bunch of games, and eventually, when some of us started to get tired, we brought out the Ouija board. A few of our friends were spooked, so they didn't want to participate. We asked innocent questions like kids usually do, such as who was the birthday girl going to marry, how old were we going to be when we had kids, and stuff like that. I remember I asked a question about myself, and the board replied, dead, which was weird. Some of the girls got spooked even more by that. Finally, a girl screamed and said that she saw something behind me in the mirror. We stopped using the board after that. For a few hours, 3 of us, including the birthday girl and I, couldn't sleep. We weren't sure if the board was real or not, so we decided we'd try one more time while everyone else was asleep, thinking that since they didn't want to play, it'd be better that way also. It was close to 3 a.m., which we had heard was the witching hour. Remember here that we were about 10 or 11 years old, dumb, and had no idea what we were doing or who we were talking to. We asked the board if it could do something for us. We said at 3:15 a.m. to have the girl who saw something in the mirror earlier wake up and say something to us. It was over 15 years ago now, so I don't remember what we asked the girl to say. All I know is we asked her to look at the mirror and say it. 3:15 a.m. was about 20 minutes or so from when we asked the question. I remember us saying goodbye to the board and putting it away. The 3 of us were talking about how impossible our ask was when 3:15 a.m. hit. We knew it hit that time because their basement had a big grandfather clock that didn't ring anymore, but the clock function still worked. We were waiting, and right before the time changed to 3:16 a.m., it happened. The girl shot straight up out of her blankets and looked straight at the mirror with her eyes closed. She whispered what we asked her to say, then dropped to her pillow like nothing ever happened. We all just looked at each other, frozen. None of the other girls that were sleeping stirred. We were so freaked out that we didn't sleep until the sun came up. We got 3 hours of sleep tops that night. That was my first ever Ouija board experience, and it changed the way I viewed spirits forever. I still think about it and feel guilty that I basically asked for one of my friends to be possessed. Like I said, we were dumb kids. Even though it was a very scary birthday party experience, it at least taught us a lesson not to do dumb stuff like that. It was our 10th anniversary, so my husband and I decided to go camping, just the 2 of us, and of course our dog. There's a big national park and camping area near where we live, a little less than an hour's drive away, so that's where we were heading. It's basically a large forest with many small lakes, ponds, trails, and camping sites around. Pretty popular place during the summer, but we still saw some people even though it was late September and the weather was cold. We found a good spot next to a lake and set up our camp. It was a beautiful day, so we wanted to hike a bit in the forest. There was a nice long path that was going around the lake where we had our camp, so we chose to go that way. The lake was quite small, and there was another camping site by it. You could see from there a camp, and from there you could also see our camp, and the camps were almost on opposite sides of the lake. We walked past the other camp and saw a man there alone, just standing and staring at us, not answering when we greeted him. He was maybe in his late 20s, around the same age as us. I thought at that point that maybe he was just shy and a little weird. He had a small tent set up and some other stuff all around the place, so I figured he had been there a while. We just continued walking and didn't think much of it. Eventually, we got to our camp and started to set up our tent before it got too dark. We made some food by the fire and just sat there enjoying the peace. Suddenly, our dog started barking like crazy. She was tied to a long wire around a tree. We immediately realized that she wasn't just paranoid and there was really something in the woods and it was near. It had been very dark for hours at that point. I took the dog and leash and my husband started to look around with his bright headlamp. Our dog just kept barking. We were confused and sure it was some kind of animal, maybe a bear or a moose, but we couldn't understand why it wasn't scared of us and why it wouldn't run away. My husband went ahead to the path that leads to the other camp. Right when he got to the path, which was less than 30 feet away from our camp, he saw something on the ground. I told him to go check it out and followed with our dog. He stopped, turned to me and said, "It's a human laying on the ground." The first thing I thought was maybe they were hurt or dead or something. They just laid there not moving, facing the ground. We asked, "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" And then they suddenly just stood up. It turned out to be the guy from the other camp. He was very scared of our dog and told me not to let her near him. I was kind of relieved that it wasn't some bear or something that was going to eat us, but I soon learned that a bear might have been less scary than this guy. After he stood up, he walked straight to our campfire and sat down. My husband tried to ask multiple times why he was sneaking in the dark forest without any light. He didn't give us any answer. We even laughed a bit and told him how we thought he was a bear or some wild animal, but he didn't even smile. He just stared at the fire, looking annoyed. His right leg was soaking wet. He had probably stepped off the path and dipped it in the lake on his way to our camp. He sat with us for 30 minutes, not talking much. He also clearly wanted to know where our dog was always. I saw he had a knife hanging from his belt, but I guess that's not that weird when you're in the woods. Every few minutes he put his hand in his pocket and just peeked at whatever was in there. It was kind of like checking the time on your phone without taking it from your pocket, but it didn't look like he had a phone in there. I felt very uncomfortable and anxious by the whole situation. So when the 30 minutes had passed, he again stood up and mumbled about going back to his own camp and left. He never gave us any explanation as to why he came to our camp or why he was stalking us in the dark. He had tried very hard not to be seen when we found him. When I thought he was far enough, I told my husband that there was no way I was sleeping in that tent. Fortunately for me, he agreed and said that the guy might come back when we were sleeping. I just wanted to leave as soon as possible, so my husband started packing things up and I was standing with the dog and looking around with the light if he decided to come back. Just when we almost had all our stuff in the car, I saw a quick flash of light on the path from the guy's camp towards ours. He was coming back. Maybe he thought that we went to sleep because he couldn't see our campfire anymore. So yeah, we got into the car and left quick. I don't know if we overreacted, but I had such a bad feeling about him. Who crawls in the dark, wet forest alone just to talk to some strangers? I'm just glad we had our dog with us. This trip made me realize that people are probably the scariest thing to find at night when you're camping. For almost a year, I worked at a Subway restaurant in my local town. I was able to become a manager there, and the town that I lived in was pretty small, so I often worked by myself. I was able to open or close the store if I needed to, and we usually wouldn't be that busy. It's more of a rural area, so other than weekends or the early evening, it was never that busy. One night, I was working a closing shift by myself. For the last few hours, it was dead, and we barely had any customers. When we closed, I did some cleaning and final tasks, locked up, and then left for the night. I got to my car, which I had parked kind of far away in the parking lot. You see, the parking lot to the Subway is connected with this other parking lot. That was for an office building, and it sort of went around a corner. As I sat in my car reading some texts before leaving, I could still see the Subway sort of. I noticed a man walk up to the doors and try to open them. I wasn't quite sure where this man had come from because no other cars were around. But after trying to open the doors, the man did not leave. He just kept standing there, and I could see that he was looking inside now. I decided to go let him know that we were closed, so I started my car and then I began driving towards the man through the parking lot. I remember that as I was doing this, he looked over at me and then started to walk away from the Subway. I drove a little bit closer, stopped, and rolled down my window. I said that the Subway was closed and told him the time that we closed at. He just said okay and then continued walking off. Then I drove away and went home. So the next night, I was working the exact same shift. I was by myself closing again, and it was a pretty similar night to the previous one. We didn't get very many customers, and then I closed up and left like usual. This time, though, after leaving, I was low on fuel, so I went over to the gas station that was nearby. The station was about a half-mile down the road, but in the opposite direction from where I had to go to get home. So I went back there and filled my tank. Then I was back on the quiet road going home again. There wasn't really anybody else out on the roads at this hour. This road happened to go right by my work of subway again. When I drove past, I looked over, probably because I worked there. However, when I did, I saw that there was a man standing next to one of the windows. This wasn't something that was that easy to see if you were just driving by, but I was able to notice him. It was a side window that he was at, and the man was standing in the grass, so it looked really strange. I wasn't sure what was going on, so I slowed down and pulled over to the side of the road. When I did, I had a little bit better view of the guy, and he looked just like the man from the night before. This was really strange. After stopping on the side of the road for less than 10 seconds, the man turned around and looked over at me. That's when I saw him turn back around and start jogging away from the subway. Pretty soon, he was out of my sight. After him running away like that, I realized that he was probably going to try to break in. I stayed where I was for a minute or so longer, and then I drove away. When I did though, I called the police non-emergency number and alerted them about it. It was very suspicious if nothing else. The next day the subway was fine and had not been broken into or anything, and for the next few times that I worked at night, I didn't encounter the man or anything strange at all. But like 2 weeks after this, I saw on the internet a news story that a subway across town had been broken into. I don't know, but I'm guessing that maybe it was the same guy. Maybe he just changed locations after I kept foiling his plans. Who knows, but I'm glad that he didn't break into the subway that I worked at. Something strange happened when I went to the mall a couple of weeks ago. I went shopping by myself one weekend. It's a mall nearby where I live, which has quite a few stores in it. I enjoy shopping at this mall because it's pretty nice. A couple of hours after I got there, I was in one of the stores looking at clothes. As I was in a random aisle, nobody else was around me. I was kind of towards the back of the store. Randomly, I heard a loud noise nearby and looked over to see a display shelf falling over. I didn't see the other side of it, so I assumed that somebody had either ran into it or pushed it over. It fell to the ground and into the aisle that I was in, and I looked and didn't see anybody nearby at all. It was confusing. It was like whoever knocked it over had quickly ran away. I walked over, and it wasn't a huge mess, so I just picked it back up. Nobody else was over there. I continued on and eventually left that store. When I was in another store maybe 20 minutes later, another weird thing happened. I was once again in an aisle by myself. Out of nowhere, something came flying over from the next aisle over and nearly hit me. It was a random hat, and I thought that this was really weird now. That was two strange things to happen in the past half hour. Was somebody messing with me for some reason? I wasn't sure. I walked out of the aisle and around to the next one and looked, but didn't see anyone. The other people in the store just appeared to be normal shoppers. There was no way of knowing if it had been them or not. So I just continued shopping, hoping that nothing else strange would happen. For the next 30 minutes or so, I went to a couple more stores and things were fine. Then I was walking down a hallway in the mall, and randomly I felt something hit the back of my leg. I stopped and looked behind me, and it was a tennis ball. Somebody must have thrown it at me. I looked around and didn't see who had done it. There weren't a ton of people around there, but there were a few. Some people looked at me picking up the tennis ball, but I still didn't know who had done it. The area that the ball had been thrown from was near an intersection of another hallway, so the person could have easily run away, or they could have ducked into a store or something. I just kept walking, and once more hoped that it would stop. For about an hour, nothing happened. I figured that whoever it was had stopped messing with me now. At one point, I stopped in the food court and was sitting down drinking a coffee. It's a large food court, and it was pretty crowded on this day. Countless people were scattered around. At that point, I went on my phone, and I saw that I had a notification on Instagram. I had a follow request on Instagram from someone. I looked at their profile, and it was a guy wearing a blue ski mask. I could not tell who he was. We didn't have any mutual followers, and when I looked at his page, he had 2 pictures of himself in various places at night. But in both photos, he was wearing the ski mask. For whatever reason, I just felt like maybe him and the strange things happening in the mall were linked. I don't know why, but I just had that thought. Then, literally, just as I was looking at the page on Instagram, I saw that I got a message request from that same user. I looked at it and he said, "I can see you." This really freaked me out, and I now knew that it had to be the same person. I looked around the food court thinking maybe I would see somebody with a blue ski mask on. I didn't though. Whoever he was hiding in plain sight, and I don't think he was wearing the ski mask. There were so many people I didn't notice anybody staring at me or anything. So I responded to him asking who he was. He did not respond to me. I was so creeped out that I decided to leave right then and there. I got up and quickly made my way for the nearest exit. I left the mall, went out to my car, and drove home. Thankfully, I wasn't followed or anything. I also blocked the Instagram account. I'm not sure who that was messing with me, and how did they find my Instagram? I haven't been back to that mall since. This happened years ago before my dad switched career paths when I was about 6 or 7 years old. He used to manage a small-time band that played at family events like birthday parties, weddings, and that kind of stuff. This one time, it was a family event birthday party. I don't remember whose, but that it was someone my parents knew. It was at a house in a quiet neighborhood, nothing fancy. Most of the adults were inside drinking and talking at this point. The band had finished playing outside. There was a bounce house set up in the backyard for the kids, but when I went in, no one else was around. I was bored and had nothing better to do. A few minutes later, a kid came in who looked younger than me. Right behind him, a man who seemed like his father appeared, but something about it was off. They didn't come through the house like everyone else. I saw the kid go over to the side gate and unlock it from inside to let his dad inside. At the time, I didn't think much of it because I was a kid. I just assumed maybe the kid's dad was late and didn't want to go through the front. The dad didn't say anything. He just walked behind the bounce house and stood where he could see inside through the mesh window, where he then pulled out his phone. The kid walked in the bounce house and looked at me and then looked at his dad. The dad nodded. Suddenly, the kid ran at me and tackled me hard. I didn't even have time to react. He pushed my face into the floor with one hand and started pulling at my pants with the other. His dad was filming. I don't know what exactly happened, but something kicked in. I got one arm free and swung back as hard as I could. I hit him in the face and he fell off me. My pants had been pulled down a bit, but my underwear was still on normal. I yanked my pants up and bolted out of the bounce house, straight through the back door and into the house where all the adults were. I didn't say anything. I couldn't really. I just stood there shaking. A few minutes later, I looked outside and saw the gate wide open. They were gone. I never saw either of them again. I didn't tell my parents that night. I don't know why. Maybe I just didn't know how. Years passed before I thought about it again. But last year, it came back to my memory, and I wonder how many other kids did the father-son duo try that tactic on. I'm glad I was able to fight the kid off me. I'd never fought anyone like that before, but I guess I had it in me all along. This story is from when my wife, who was then my girlfriend, and I lived in South Africa. There are a lot of game farms and lodges in South Africa, especially around the area of Kruger National Park. This incident took place on a very tranquil 4-star game farm close to the southern tip of Kruger National Park. We had frequented the lodge over the 5 years before this incident, as it was a favorite spot for my girlfriend and me. The lodge had a very nice central area with a pool and restaurant, and the tented chalets were spread out around the property. The chalets were very private and set up in a bush so that you could not see the next one over and could only hear your neighbors if they were very loud. Sadly, the lodge had fallen on hard times and had gone backwards a bit. The weekend this incident took place, only 2 of the 25 units were occupied for the Friday night, and we were the only ones there for the Saturday night. It made me feel a little bit uneasy. To make matters worse, the lodge and farm manager came by on Saturday morning, saying he was leaving the farm for the weekend. He said if we needed anything just to help ourselves in the restaurant fridges and to leave a note and we could settle the bill the next week. It was nice that we would have the pool and jacuzzi all for ourselves. We left to go visit different parts of the national park after the manager left, and we stayed out for most of the day. We got back around 3 p.m., and as we got out of the car, I got goosebumps. It was over 100 degrees Fahrenheit out, so I didn't feel cold. As we approached the chalet, I noticed large shoe prints over my and my girlfriend's prints from the morning. That seriously put me on edge. I approached the chalet and noticed the prints turned around and walked back the way they came. Everything seemed in order at the chalet. We went for a swim and had a game drive around the farm and returned around 5:30. We started to make the fire, barbecue our meat, and prepare some other food. Both my girlfriend and I seemed quite on edge and very quiet. We sat down to eat at around 8 p.m. As we sat down, I looked at my girlfriend and noticed she looked very worried. I asked her what was wrong, and she said that she had a bad feeling and that we needed to leave now. I said I felt the same and we should probably leave after we ate. She refused to sit down and eat though, saying that we needed to leave now, as in immediately, not after we ate. I didn't argue with her, so we chucked our food in the cooler, grabbed our bags, and ran to the car. As we drove out the gate, we dropped the keys in the box and drove away, and the feeling of dread slowly went away. We made the almost 100-mile drive home in the dark and slept in our own bed. We woke up Sunday morning and went about our day as normal. About 4 p.m. that afternoon, my phone rang, and I saw it was the number from the lodge manager. I answered, and he frantically asked if we were okay. I told him that we were safe and sound at home and that we had left the national park last night. He started explaining what happened after we left, and I got ice cold. Apparently, the lodge was broken into and ransacked the Saturday night. They took everything of value, and what they could not take, they destroyed. It was a group of 5 men that did it. Apparently, there was evidence that they ransacked a chalet as well. Only one. The one that my girlfriend and I were booked into. The one that we would have been sleeping in had we not so abruptly left the previous night. So it meant they had been watching us, and the boot prints was somebody keeping tabs on us. The lodge had cameras, but the chalets did not. We left just after 8 p.m. Probably about 8:10 is when we had everything in the car and started driving down the road. It was probably about 8:20 when we left the farm, as it's a few miles drive from the lodge to the gate down a gravel road to exit the national park. The cameras at the lodge caught the first signs of movement at the lodge just before 8:30. At least one of the men was visibly armed with a firearm in the footage, and a few had machetes. We had probably missed the intruders by only 5 to 10 minutes at most. I shudder to think of what would have happened had we been there. There was nobody nearby. We were completely alone on the farm. Only a little bit of cell reception at the lodge, and none at the chalet itself. We would not have been able to call for help. Needless to say, we did not go to the lodges or isolated areas for a long time after that. And sadly, the lodge and farm went under not long after, and it got sold in an auction. That incident has shocked us both a bit, and we vowed to always trust our instincts and intuition, and to tell each other if something felt off. We both had that uneasy feeling since about 3 p.m. that Saturday afternoon when we came back, and the reason none of us said anything to each other was because we didn't want to spoil the weekend for one another. That almost cost us possibly the ultimate price. I live alone, and I still have a home phone. This is something that I've seen is less common nowadays because of cell phones, but I have a plan with the cable company where I get phone, internet, and TV in a bundle. So I still have a landline telephone in the house, but I will admit I hardly ever use it. However, something happened not long ago that is making me seriously consider getting rid of it altogether. I was at home by myself one evening not too long after arriving home from work. As I was watching TV in the living room, I heard the home phone ring. I wasn't sure who it was because I didn't get too many calls on that phone, and the ones that I do are usually just spam telemarketers or things like that. But it was nighttime now, so not the time when they usually called. I got up and walked over to the phone. I looked at the screen and it said, "Unknown caller." Now, this would be enough for most people to not answer, and normally I wouldn't either, but on this time, for whatever reason, I was curious and decided to answer the phone. When I did, I heard nothing at first. I said, "Hello?" and then said it again. There was still nothing. Then I heard a man on the other end of the phone who sounded upset. He said, "I think I have the wrong number." I said, "Okay, no problem." The man said nothing, but I could hear him breathing. It was really weird, so I hung up the phone. Then I went back to the couch. However, only about a half an hour later, the phone rang again. I went back over and it said "unknown caller" again. I answered the phone once more because I was somehow even more curious now. It was the same guy. And this is what was really strange. Without me even saying anything, like right after I picked up, he said, "I think I have the wrong number." The same thing as he said before. Once more, he sounded borderline distraught. I was so confused. I said, "Okay, well, you called me again." He said nothing. I asked, "Who is it that you're trying to call?" The man started to say again, "I think I have the wrong number," but he hung up before he finished saying it, so he only said, "I think I have the and then he hung up. I was really weirded out by this guy. I didn't know why he kept calling me if he had the wrong number, and why did he sound so upset? Also, the fact that my caller ID said "unknown number" made the whole thing that much more creepy. I returned to the couch hoping that he would not call again, but he did. It was almost an hour later when the phone rang. I picked it up once more. This time, as soon as I picked up, I said, "Why do you keep calling me?" There was a long pause, and then the man said, "I think I have the wrong number." I said, "Call me again and I'm reporting you." Then I hung up on him. Now, I will admit, I do not know how to block a number on a home phone. I only know how to do that on a smartphone. so I just went back to what I was doing and hoped that he wouldn't call again. The phone rang again about an hour after that. By now it was getting to be later at night. I got up and saw that it was unknown caller again. By now I was fully freaked out. I thought about picking up, but decided not to. I thought that maybe if I didn't entertain this guy's madness, he would let me be, so I walked away. But then I heard the beep of the answering machine. I froze in my tracks and listened. The man started speaking. He said, "I think I have the wrong number." Then he repeated it again. "I think I have the wrong number." Each time he said it, he sounded more upset and distraught. He said it 4 times before being cut off during the 5th time and hanging up, ending the message. After that, he didn't call for over an hour. I figured my method of not answering the phone had worked. Soon I got ready for bed and headed to my room to go to sleep. I fell asleep without much problem despite being slightly creeped out, but I was awoken sometime in the middle of the night. As soon as I awoke, I heard the sound of the phone ringing. This was strange because although the phone ring could be heard from my bedroom, it wasn't loud enough to wake me up typically. Normally, I would sleep right through it, but not this time. I looked at the clock and it was 2 a.m. I heard the phone ringing and then it finally stopped and went to message. I was dreading hearing the voice again and could not believe that the guy was still calling me, especially at this hour. But he did not leave a message at all, which made me feel slightly better. However, the guy then simply called again. My phone was ringing once more. I still didn't answer. Then, after the phone ringing stopped, the guy called again about 30 seconds later. It was like he was just going to keep calling me and calling me. Finally, I got up and went to the phone. As it was ringing again, I decided to answer it. When I did, I heard nothing at first. Then I said, "Hello?" Then I heard the man again. He said, "I think I have the wrong number." It was too creepy. I instantly hung up the phone. Then I unplugged it from the wall and took the phone jack out as well. That made it finally stop. I was so freaked out that it took me almost an hour to fall back asleep. The next day, I was still thinking about how crazy that was. I left my phone unplugged for over a week. Since then, I've put it back in, and I have not received any more crazy calls like that. I still wonder who did that and why. Maybe it was just a prank, but whoever did that really went to great lengths if that's the case. I mean, to call that many times, never laugh, and to do it after 2 a.m. when I wasn't answering is pretty crazy. And I also have no idea who could have possibly done that or why they would have pulled a prank like that on me. I'm just hoping that that guy never calls me again. A few years ago, my partner and I decided to take a trip to California to see some of the state parks, ghost towns, and off-the-beaten-path things that don't get a lot of tourist traffic. For the first leg of the trip, everything went great. We camped in our car, found some great picturesque landscapes, creepy ghost towns, scenic views, and forgotten highways. I absolutely loved it. After about a week and a half on the road, we decided it was time to start heading to back home in Oregon. But we decided to take the scenic route for some of it instead of just driving straight home. Our meandering path took us through Death Valley National Park, where there was a short hike to a beautiful waterfall we had seen online and wanted to do before heading back. We found the trail without issue and began the mile hike to the waterfall. Death Valley is desolate, and it's a creepy place that has spooked me bad on more than one occasion, but something about this trail was different, sinister even. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I couldn't hear anybody around us though. I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. There were no cars on the trailhead when we got there, so I figured we were alone, but I didn't feel that way. The feeling persisted until we reached the end of the mile hike and saw the waterfall. We sat for a moment, took a few pictures, and started hiking back towards the car. I still felt like something was wrong. I felt eyes on me and had a sort of feeling of dread for seemingly no reason at all. I tried to shake it off, but I just couldn't. I started walking a little faster to our car. We got there without incident. We started throwing our hiking poles and water bottles into the back seat of the car. I noticed there was a black SUV with limo-tinted windows parked next to us in the trailhead parking lot. The car was not running. I didn't see anybody around, and it didn't seem like anybody was in it. But where was the driver? The only place the driver could have been was on the same trail as my partner and I, but I hadn't seen or heard the driver on the trail. It was an out-and-back trail with very steep rocky cliffs on either side of the trail, so the chances of me seeing the driver were high if they were on the trail. The chances of them being off the trail were slim, as the undergrowth was extremely heavy until you got off the cliffside. I'm also certain that I would have heard somebody crashing through the undergrowth near the trail. As I was thinking about this and getting more and more anxious, I saw a huge man emerge silently from the bushes next to the trail to the waterfall. When I say silently, I mean it. He made no noise at all. He was easily at least 6'4", strong-looking, and covered in what my partner believed were criminal tattoos. He had a baseball cap pulled down low over his sunglasses, a long full beard, some kind of rifle slung across his back, and a large hunting knife on his belt. He was holding what appeared to be a cell phone in his hands and waving down my partner. I realized that this huge man had a gun, and the distance between him to us was irrelevant, but I was in panic mode. The man said that he found this cell phone near the waterfall and didn't want us to leave without it. We both quickly checked our pockets and realized that we both had our cell phones, and we both assumed that this was a setup for a robbery or something far more sinister. We jumped into the car, fired her up, and drove up the dirt road as quick as we could. The man just stared at us through the rear window as we drove off. It terrifies me to think that he was out there with us the whole time we were hiking, and we didn't hear him, see him, or even know that he was there. I never would have known the man was out there with us had he not chosen to make his presence known. I'm not going to lie, it really made me think twice about hiking alone in the woods or in isolated and desolate areas. I also find myself wondering what would have happened had we chosen to engage with him. As a teen, I was a die-hard theater kid. It was fall, and I was in a local community theater production a few cities away. I distinctly kept two groups of friends. There were my school friends and my theater friends. This was because my theater friends were majority religious, homeschooled, and sheltered kids who did theater to socialize. None of them went to school with me, and they lived in adjacent areas and traveled as I did to do community theater in this nearby city. To meet in the middle and hang out with my theater friends, my mom suggested that we have my birthday party with my theater friends after rehearsal. That way they didn't have to travel any extra. I suggested that we have a karaoke party because I loved my karaoke machine, and I also innocently believed that any place that hosted karaoke nights would surely be welcoming to 15 teenagers singing show tunes. My mom, the chaperone of the century, found a seedy dive bar in the area that started karaoke early in the evening and served bar food. The night of my party, my friends and I obliviously bustled into this dive bar with my mom leading the pack. She ordered us a bunch of onion rings and fries, pushed some tables together, and my group of friends and I went about our business, hogging the songbook singing karaoke. At one point, I looked around. This bar must have been dead before we came in, because only a handful of people besides us were in the bar. There were a group of Marines, no doubt from the nearby military base. They were two older dudes who looked like regulars. Then in the only occupied booth in the corner, there was a person sitting alone, and something about him seemed strange. At first, I thought my suspicion was internalized judgment, because this person was a man in his 60s or 70s, and he was dressed in women's clothing. I'm unsure what he identified as, but for the story, I'm calling him a man. He was wearing black heels and pantyhose, a skirt and a jacket combo, a bob wig, pink lipstick, bright blush, and sunglasses. He was drinking dark liquor with an unsteady hand. As we figured out our songs and settled in, my friend's eyes wandered around the room as well. My most sheltered friend Holly whispered to me asking why that man was dressed the way he was. I patiently explained what little I knew about trans people and cross-dressing, and besides my friend making obvious glances in his general direction, the subject was dropped. But shortly after we all sang a few songs, our streak of songs in a row was broken to welcome Carl up to the stage, the person from the booth in the corner. I remember looking at him making the short walk to the karaoke stage and thinking that I had never seen someone so stressed out in my life. His body was tense, knees locked, and though the eyes were covered by sunglasses, it was clear that his gaze was fixed far off. The intro music started to play for his song, and he started offbeat far behind the music with the breathiest, shakiest voice. He didn't look at the screen with the lyrics once and missed many words. Then he would realize he messed up and sigh into the microphone or curse to himself, only to return to the chorus singing in lagged and shaky breaths. His anxiety was amped up as the song went by, and the tension spread throughout the room. It was obvious that watching him made everybody increasingly uncomfortable, as it made him uncomfortable as well. I was trying my best to smile and encourage my friends to clap along. Suddenly, mid-song, Carl began whispering the lyrics very quietly with his mouth right on the mic. Then his voice started breaking and he stopped singing. He returned the mic to the stand with the music still playing, wiped tears from his eyes under his sunglasses, and abruptly walked off the stage. He grabbed his black purse from the booth and left the bar in a hurry. It was unsettling, but after the initial feeling passed, we all sort of shrugged and laughed in shared awkwardness, and the party continued. My party was the talk of the theater kids circuit for a few weeks. Going to a real bar with real strangers was all anyone wanted to talk about. 2 weeks went by, and it was now the week before the opening night of our show. We were going to rehearsal, and the street behind the theater was blocked off with police tape. My mom was volunteering that night and stuck around the theater during rehearsal. She was outside for a bit and ended up doing some investigating, and we asked a group of homeless locals what was going on down the street. Turns out someone had murdered and dismembered his wife. Neighbors reported a horrific smell, and the police had found parts of her in pans on the stove, which was found on, and her head in the freezer. Turned out that the Carl character we had seen in the dive bar was the one who murdered his wife. Apparently, Carl was his stage name. I'm not sure what his real name was, and he and his wife were well-known characters in the city. His wife had been seen welding knives and running around town in various stages of undress, and Carl was well known for his cross-dressing ways and prowling through the city at night. His mainstay favorite bar was, of course, the dive bar that we had my birthday party at. But the creepiest part was when the police discovered the crime scene. It had been a couple of weeks since the murder, and the body had been dead for a while. It was very possible that 2 weeks earlier we were listening to Carl singing karaoke after he had murdered his wife. Again, maybe he hadn't yet, but that would explain why he looked so broken down and distraught at the dive bar the night of my birthday party. Last year, I had a pretty creepy experience involving a wrong number, or at least that's what I thought it was. Randomly one time, I got a text from a number that I didn't know, simply saying, "Hey." I wasn't sure who it was, so I said, "Hey, who's this? I don't have this number saved." The person responded saying, "Hey Mark, meet me." My name is not Mark, so I knew that it was a wrong number. I responded saying that I was not Mark and they must have the wrong number. Very soon after, I got another text. They said, "Okay, who are you?" I realized then that it was probably a scam and they were trying to get my information. I heard about some of these sort of text scams and had gotten one once before. Most of the time, if somebody actually has the wrong number, they will just say, "My bad, wrong number," and then not text again. They wouldn't be very interested in you, but only interested in the actual number they're trying to reach. So when they asked who I was, I didn't respond. But surprising to me, they texted again a while later. This time they texted saying, "Answer me." This was strange, but I still thought that it was a scam. I responded and said, "I'm not falling for your scam." I thought then that they wouldn't respond to me, but I was wrong. Just moments after I sent the text, they tried FaceTiming me. At first, I didn't answer it. I thought that it was too weird, and I was not expecting it at all. But after I didn't pick up, they tried to FaceTime me once more. This time I was curious, so I decided to answer. When I did, it was hard to see at first who was on the other end. But after looking, it appeared to be somebody who was in a very dark, unfinished basement. I couldn't make out the details of their face because it was too dark and sort of blurry. The quality wasn't the greatest either, but I could tell that it appeared to be a man, and he started talking in an extremely deep voice. The voice did not sound natural, like he was trying to fake it. As he spoke, I couldn't make out any of the words that he was saying either. He was sort of mumbling, and it didn't make any sense. I said nothing because I had no idea what to possibly say. I just sat there watching him in shock. He continued to move around the dark basement and ramble incoherently in that creepy deep voice. He went on for about a minute or two, and I couldn't take it anymore. I ended the call, and then I blocked the number right then and there. It was really strange. After that, I didn't get any other weird texts or calls. Looking back at it now, I still have no clue who that was. I'm not sure why they texted me or called me. It was not the scam like I thought it was. But what was it? I'm still trying to figure that out.